She drained the glass of water he'd handed her, thinking it was a kind gesture after such a tense dinner. Tense because his mother had relentlessly interrogated her about her salary, while his father had bluntly declared she wasn't the best choice for his son's future. She had shrunk under their razor-sharp words, and he'd only offered a half-hearted squeeze of her hand in comfort. But now, as a heavy fog clouded her mind and her limbs refused to move, she finally understood. It wasn't just water, and his silence during dinner hadn't been weakness. She lay there, paralyzed but terrifyingly awake, listening as his voice joined his mother's in the next room, casually discussing how to handle her. That horrifying dinner hadn't been a test. It had been the first step in taking her down. The ultimate betrayal is just unfolding. We want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments where in the world and what time of day you're watching this from. If you're already hooked, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single moment of this ruthless scheme. Finally, based on this chilling intro, rate the story's potential on a scale of 1 to 10. You're slipping, Clara. Again. Daniel's voice sliced through the dining room, his polished smile a blade aimed at Clara's chest. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding as she gripped the edge of the white linen tablecloth. The Portland dining room, all sleek glass and sharp angles, felt like a courtroom, and Daniel Harper, her 48-year-old corporate lawyer husband, was judge and jury. Across the table, their neighbor Evelyn nodded, her lips curling with false pity, her eyes glinting like a hawk's. Clara, 45, an environmental scientist whose water purification patent could save millions, sat rigid, her fork trembling in her hand. Daniel leaned forward, his tailored suit creasing, his tone dripping venom. "You forgot the investor meeting. Embarrassed me in front of Klein's team. You're not yourself anymore." Clara's pulse hammered, her throat dry as she opened her mouth to protest. "I didn't forget. Stop." Daniel's hand shot up, cutting her off, his eyes narrowing. "Don't make excuses. You're unraveling, Clara. Everyone sees it." Evelyn's nod deepened, her fingers tapping her wine glass, a silent agreement. Clara's chest burned, her breath shallow, but she forced her face to stay calm, her hazel eyes locked on Daniel's. She wasn't unraveling. She'd been up all night refining her patent, her life's work, a technology to purify water for communities drowning in corporate pollution. But Daniel's words, laced with accusation, twisted her reality, making her doubt her own mind. He stood crossing to the kitchen counter, his movements deliberate, predatory. "You need help, love," he said, his voice softening but sharp beneath, like a knife wrapped in silk. He poured tea from a silver kettle, his back to her, and Clara caught a flicker of his hand. Something small, a pill, dissolving into the amber liquid. Her stomach twisted, a primal alarm ringing in her skull. "Drink this," he said, sliding the cup toward her, his smile too perfect, too practiced. "It's for your nerves." Evelyn's gaze pinned Clara, her smirk barely hidden. "He's right, dear. You look exhausted," she said, her voice syrupy, her eyes cold. Clara's fingers curled around the cup, the warmth biting her skin. She wanted to scream, to fling the tea in his face, but her body froze, years of his control chaining her instincts. She lifted the cup, her lips brushing the rim, the faint chemical tang hitting her tongue. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of betrayal. She sipped, her eyes never leaving Daniel's, searching for the man who'd once cheered her late-night lab breakthroughs. That man was gone, replaced by this stranger whose every word was a calculated strike. As the sedative seeped into her veins, her vision blurred, but her mind clung to a single image. A tarnished key slipping from Daniel's pocket as he cleared the table, clinking softly on the hardwood floor, unnoticed by him, but searing into her memory. The room tilted, her legs weakening, but Clara's resolve hardened. She wouldn't collapse, not in front of them. Her teeth ground harder, pain shooting through her jaw as she fought the drug's pull. Daniel's voice droned on, lecturing about her fragility, but it was Evelyn's smug glance that cut deepest, a conspirator's look. Clara's fingers tightened on the cup, her knuckles white, as she realized this wasn't just Daniel's game. Something bigger was at play, and that key, small, rusted, out of place, was her first clue. As her head swam, she vowed to hold on, to unravel whatever Daniel was hiding. The tea's bitterness lingered on her tongue, a promise of the fight to come. Clara's knees buckled, the sedative's grip tightening like a vice around her limbs, but she refused to crumble. "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," she bit out, her voice a low growl, each word a shard of defiance slicing through the haze. Her hazel eyes blazed, locking onto his, daring him to see the fire he hadn't snuffed out. Daniel's smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his chiseled face, but he waved her off, his hand dismissive, as if her words were dust. Evelyn's lips twitched, her fingers drumming on the wineglass, her gaze sharp enough to draw blood. Clara's chest heaved, her breath ragged, but she forced her body to move, one deliberate step at a time, toward the bathroom door. The tarnished key's image burned in her mind, a lifeline anchoring her to the truth she was beginning to grasp. She stumbled into the bathroom, the cold tiles biting her bare feet, and locked the door with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Her hands gripped the sink, knuckles whitening, as she stared into the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, pale, eyes sunken, but her jaw was set, teeth grinding so hard her temples throbbed. The tea's chemical aftertaste coated her tongue, a bitter reminder of Daniel's betrayal. Her fingers fumbled to her pocket, brushing the tarnished key she'd scooped up when Daniel turned away. Its rough edges pressed into her palm, grounding her as the room spun. She wouldn't let him win. Not like this. Not after years of his subtle cuts, his concern that caged her, his voice that made her doubt her own brilliance. Clara's heart pounded, each beat a war drum against the sedative's pull. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock jolting her senses, forcing her mind to claw through the fog. Her thoughts raced to her lab notebook, left on the dining table, its pages filled with her water purification patent, her life's work, her fight for clean water in communities choked by corporate greed. Daniel's words echoed, "You're unraveling." No, she wasn't. She was a scientist, a creator, and she'd be damned if she let him paint her as broken. Her fingers tightened around the key, its weight a promise. She didn't know what it unlocked, but it was a piece of his puzzle, and she'd use it to tear his lies apart. Outside, Daniel's voice carried through the door, smooth and patronizing, talking to Evelyn about Clara's condition. "She's not coping," he said, his tone dripping with false pity. Evelyn's murmur of agreement was a knife in Clara's gut, confirming her suspicion. Evelyn wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was in on it, whatever it was. Clara's nails dug into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She leaned against the door, her breath shallow, fighting the drug's weight. Her mind flashed to the moment she'd sipped the tea, Daniel's eyes glinting with something cold, something calculated. She'd trusted him once, believed in the man who toasted her breakthroughs with cheap wine in their grad school days. That trust was ashes now, but her resolve was steel. She straightened, her legs trembling but holding firm, and wiped her face with a towel. Her reflection hardened, the scientist reawakening. She wouldn't confront him now, not yet. She needed to play his game, let him think she was weak while she pieced together the truth. The key in her pocket was her first weapon, a small, rusted clue to whatever Daniel was hiding. As the sedative dragged at her, she whispered to herself, "You don't get to erase me." Her voice was a vow, low and fierce, carrying the weight of years suppressed. She unlocked the door, her hand steady, and stepped back into the hall, her face a mask of fragility, but her heart a furnace of defiance. The dining room light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet to be uncovered, pulling her toward the fight ahead. Daniel's fingers froze on Clara's lab notebook, its worn leather cover open on the dining room table. The pages a testament to her brilliance, her water purification patent, equations scrawled in her precise hand. His smirk faded, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his mouth as he flipped to a new page, one he hadn't seen before. A sketch of a lock, jagged and crude, stared back at him, drawn in Clara's ink but with an urgency that didn't match her usual precision. His pulse quickened, a bead of sweat prickling his brow. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice low, sharp, like a blade catching on bone. He slammed the notebook shut, his eyes darting to the bathroom door where Clara had retreated, her defiant words, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," still ringing in his ears. Had she seen the key? Did she know? He paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood, the sound a metronome to his rising unease. The tarnished key, now back in his pocket, burned against his thigh, a secret he hadn't meant to drop. It unlocked a safe in his office, holding documents that could ruin him. Contracts tying him to Margaret Klein's corporation, proof of their plan to bury Clara's patent. He'd been careless, letting it slip during dinner, and now this sketch, this jagged lock, felt like a warning. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding as he replayed Clara's steady gaze, her refusal to collapse under the sedative's weight. She wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to fade, to let him control the narrative, to let him sell her work to Klein's empire for millions while declaring her incompetent. Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone syrupy but edged. "She's getting worse, Daniel. You saw her stumble." She leaned against the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, her eyes glinting with complicity. "The doctor's appointment tomorrow will seal it." Daniel nodded, but his stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with the nagging fear he'd underestimated Clara. He forced a smile, his voice smooth. "She's no threat. The pill's doing its job." But as he spoke, his hand slipped into his pocket, clutching the key, its rough edges biting his skin. The sketch haunted him. Had Clara drawn it before the tea or after? Was she playing him? In the bathroom, Clara leaned against the sink, her breath ragged, her fingers gripping the tarnished key like a lifeline. The sedative dragged at her limbs, but her mind was a furnace, burning through the fog. She'd overheard Daniel's phone call as she'd stumbled to the door, his voice cold, clinical. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer striking steel, forging her rage. The key, small and rusted, was no accident. It was a crack in Daniel's armor, a clue to his betrayal. She didn't know what it opened, but it was tied to the lie he'd fed her, the lie that her work, her life, was slipping away because of her own weakness. Her teeth ground so hard her jaw ached, the pain anchoring her against the drug's pull. She splashed more water on her face, the cold biting her skin, and stared into the mirror. Her reflection was pale, but her eyes were alive, blazing with a fury she hadn't felt in years. Daniel thought he'd broken her, thought his concern had caged her spirit. But that key, that sketch she'd scribbled in her notebook before dinner, was her rebellion. She'd drawn the lock instinctively, a fragment of her scientist's mind, piecing together the puzzle of his control. Now, hearing his words, she knew. He wasn't just undermining her, he was erasing her. Daniel's footsteps echoed outside, closer now, and Clara's pulse spiked. She tucked the key deeper into her pocket, her fingers trembling but resolute. She wouldn't confront him, not yet. She needed to stay sharp, to play the fragile wife he expected, while she hunted for the truth. His voice came through the door, softer now, laced with fake worry. "Clara, you okay in there?" Her lips curled, a silent snarl, as she forced her voice to quiver. "Just dizzy," she said, letting her words wobble, a performance to keep him off guard. She unlocked the door, her hand steady despite the drug's weight, and stepped out, her face a mask of exhaustion, but her mind a coiled spring. The dining room light flickered, casting Daniel's shadow long and jagged, like the lock in her sketch, a promise of secrets she'd tear open. "You think you can outsmart me, Clara?" Daniel's voice hissed through the phone, his words a venomous jab as he stood in his sleek Portland office. The city's pulse muted beyond the glass walls. His fingers gripped the receiver, knuckles whitening, as he spoke to Evelyn, his ally in betrayal. The tarnished key sat heavy in his pocket, a nagging reminder of the sketch he'd found in Clara's lab notebook. A jagged lock, drawn with an urgency that gnawed at his certainty. Her words from last night, "I'll be fine, Daniel. I always am," echoed in his skull. Not the frail whimper he'd expected, but a steel-edged vow that made his pulse spike. He drugged her tea, watched her stumble, But that sketch, that defiance, suggested she wasn't as broken as he needed her to be. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding until his temples throbbed, as he realized he might have miscalculated. He slammed the phone down, his tailored suit creasing as he paced, each step a hammer strike against the polished floor. Clara's notebook, now locked in his desk, haunted him. That lock sketch wasn't just a doodle, it was a crack in his plan to sell her water purification patent to Margaret Klein's corporation, a deal that would bury her technology and line his pockets with millions. He needed her docile, declared incompetent, but her steady gaze last night, her refusal to collapse, planted a seed of doubt. Was she on to him? He needed to find her, to gauge her, to smother any spark of rebellion before it ignited. His fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges biting his skin, a secret tying him to the safe where the contract with Klein waited, unsigned but damning. Daniel grabbed his coat, his movements sharp, predatory, and drove to the community center where Clara volunteered, a place she'd mentioned in passing, her voice soft but alive with purpose. The thought of her there, surrounded by people, teaching kids about clean water, twisted his gut. Not with guilt, but with fear she was slipping from his control. He parked, his eyes scanning the lot, and strode inside, his charm a polished mask as he approached the receptionist. "I'm here for Clara Bennett," he said, his smile tight, his tone clipped. "Her husband. She's not well." The receptionist hesitated, her eyes narrowing but pointed him toward a classroom. Daniel's heart pounded, his hand clutching the key like a talisman as he prepared to confront her. Inside, he saw Clara through the glass door, her hands gesturing animatedly as she explained a water filter model to a group of kids. Her face, usually pale under his shadow, was alight, her hazel eyes sharp, her voice steady. His stomach lurched. This wasn't the fragile wife he'd crafted. He pushed the door open, cutting off her sentence mid-word. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice a blade, slicing through the room's warmth. The kids froze, their eyes wide, but Clara's gaze met his, unflinching, her jaw tightening. "Not now, Daniel," she said, her words crisp, a warning. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and hissed, "You're embarrassing yourself. You need rest." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers curling into fists, but she didn't back down. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm, and pulled her toward the hall, ignoring the kids' murmurs. "You're not well," he said, his voice low, cutting off her protest. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." Her eyes flashed, a storm brewing, but she nodded, her shoulders slumping in a calculated act of submission. His chest loosened, thinking he'd won, but her gaze lingered on his pocket, where the key hid. As he let her out, her notebook flashed in his mind, the lock sketch a taunt. He needed to find Elena Torres, Clara's old lab partner, the one she'd been emailing. If Clara was talking, Elena might know too much. Daniel's fingers tightened on Clara's arm, his resolve hardening, but her silence was heavy, a coiled spring ready to snap. As they stepped into the parking lot, Clara's hand brushed her pocket, where the tarnished key rested, her secret weapon, a promise of the truth she'd claw from his lies. "Keep dreaming, Maya. Your ideas can change the world," Clara said, her voice steady, a spark of fire cutting through the fog of last night's sedative. Her hazel eyes locked onto the young girl's, a 12-year-old with a sketchbook clutched tight, her pencil hovering over a crude drawing of a water filter. Clara knelt beside her at the community center's worn table, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her limbs. A lingering ghost of Daniel's drug. The Portland classroom buzzed with kids' chatter, their energy a pulse that fueled her, but her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as she recalled Daniel's grip on her arm an hour ago, his hissed words, "You're confused, Clara," still burning in her ears. She wasn't confused. She was awake, her scientist's mind sharpening, the tarnished key in her pocket, a weight anchoring her to the truth. Clara's hand brushed the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a reminder of the sketch she'd drawn in her lab notebook. The jagged lock, a rebellion against Daniel's control. She'd slipped it from his pocket last night, a small act of defiance after hearing his chilling phone call. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer, forging her resolve. She wasn't the fragile wife he'd painted her to be. She was Clara Bennett, the environmental scientist who'd spent years perfecting a water purification patent to save communities from corporate poison. Here in this classroom, surrounded by kids like Maya, she felt her old self stirring, the woman who'd once believed her work could shift the world. She straightened, her fingers guiding Maya's pencil to refine the filter's design, her voice calm but fierce. See this valve? It's your key to clean water. Never let anyone tell you it's impossible. Maya's eyes widened, her nod eager, and Clara's chest tightened, a mix of pride and pain. She saw herself in Maya, young, hungry to create, before Daniel's subtle cuts had dulled her edges. His interruption earlier, dragging her from this very room, had been a power play, his charm a mask for control. But his eyes had flickered when she'd met his gaze, a crack in his armor, and she'd played along, letting her shoulders slump, her voice waver, to keep him off guard. Her teeth ground harder, the ache grounding her as she pushed back the memory of his cold touch. Clara's gaze flicked to her journal, tucked in her bag, its pages filled with notes on her patent. And now, her suspicions. She'd written about the tea, the chemical tang, Daniel's too-perfect smile, and the key. Each word was a step toward clarity, a map to unravel his betrayal. She'd overheard his plan to erase her, to steal her work, and the key was her first clue, a piece of his puzzle she'd wheeled against him. She moved to another student, her hands steady as she adjusted a model pump, her voice a beacon of encouragement. Keep testing, Jamal. Failure's just data. The kids grinned, their trust in her a lifeline, pulling her from the cage Daniel had built. But her pulse spiked as she caught Evelyn's shadow outside the classroom window, her neighbor's eyes sharp, watching. Evelyn's fake concern last night, her nod to Daniel's lies, confirmed she was no bystander. Clara's fingers curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms, the pain sharpening her focus. She wouldn't let them see her falter. She turned back to Maya, forcing a smile, her voice steady. Your filter's going to save lives one day, she said, her words a vow to herself as much as to the girl. She wasn't done fighting. Not for these kids, not for her patient, not for the truth. The journal in her bag felt heavier, its pages a weapon, and the key in her pocket a promise. She'd play Daniel's game, let him think he'd won, but her mind was racing, piecing together his lies. As the kids packed up, Clara's gaze lingered on the window. Evelyn gone, but her presence a lingering threat. A whisper of the bigger fight waiting just beyond the classroom's walls. You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this, Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket. A secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. She's out. The plan's working. Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life? Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. You're not well, he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara. His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. I'm sorry, she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. I didn't mean to worry you. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading, while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn's spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're killing yourself, Clara. Let me fix this," Daniel growled, his voice a jagged edge as he loomed in their Portland dining room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw anger in his eyes. Clara stood rigid, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, her fingers brushing the tarnished key in her pocket, a secret she'd stolen from him, a clue to the betrayal she'd overheard. "She's out. The plan's working." Her heart pounded, each beat a war drum, as she faced the man who drugged her tea last night, his fake concern now a blade aimed at her spirit. The memory of her defiance at the community center earlier, teaching Maya and the kids, fueled her scientist's mind sharp despite the sedative's lingering fog. She wouldn't let him see her crack, not when Evelyn's spying eyes and his chilling phone call confirmed a plot bigger than she'd feared. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but Clara jerked back, her eyes blazing. "Fix what, Daniel? My work? My life?" Her voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding, cutting through his attempt to control the room. His face twitched, a flicker of unease breaking his polished mask. "You're not well," he snapped, cutting her off, his tone slicing her protest in half. "You're forgetting things, missing meetings. I'm worried, Clara." His words dripped with false pity, but his eyes were cold, predatory, scanning her for weakness. She forced her shoulders to slump, her face softening into the fragile mask he expected. But her pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her against his lies. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a calculated quiver, playing the part of the broken wife. "I didn't mean to worry you." Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his smirk returning, thinking he'd won. But Clara's mind was a storm, piecing together his plan to steal her water purification patent, to declare her incompetent, to bury her work with Margaret Klein's corporation. She'd seen Evelyn's shadow at the community center, her neighbor's gaze too sharp, too knowing. The key in her pocket, tied to the lock sketch in her journal, was her weapon, a fragment of truth she'd used to unravel him. She needed time, needed him to believe she was fading while she hunted for answers. Daniel crossed to his briefcase on the counter, his movements deliberate, unaware of Clara's eyes tracking him. "I'll handle everything," he said, his voice smooth, a king dictating terms. "You rest. Doctor's appointment tomorrow." Clara nodded, her lips pressed thin, her heart a furnace of defiance. As he rummaged through his papers, a sealed envelope slipped out, its corner marked with a lock symbol matching her sketch. Her breath hitched, her fingers itching to grab it, but she held still, her face blank. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft, testing. Daniel's hand froze, his eyes snapping to hers, sharp as a blade. "Nothing," he barked, cutting her off, stuffing the envelope back. "Just work. You wouldn't understand." His dismissal stung, but Clara's mind locked onto the envelope, a piece of his puzzle falling into place. She moved to clear the table, her hands trembling with purpose, not fear. As Daniel turned to his phone, distracted, she slipped the envelope into her sleeve, her pulse spiking as she tucked it against her wrist. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a promise of secrets waiting to be unlocked. "I'll try harder," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread, feeding his ego while her eyes burned with resolve. Daniel nodded, his smirk widening, but his fingers lingered on his briefcase, as if sensing a shift. Clara's journal, hidden in her bag, held her suspicions. The tea, the key, the sketch. And now this envelope was another weapon. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a mirror of Clara's lost dreams. She wouldn't let Daniel erase her, not for Maya, not for the communities her patent could save. As Daniel retreated to his office, his footsteps heavy, Clara stood alone, her fingers brushing the envelope's lock symbol, her mind racing. Evelyn spying, the key, the phone call. They were threads in a web she was beginning to see. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, the one person who'd believe her. The envelope was a crack in Daniel's armor, and she'd pry it open. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she vowed to play his game, to feign weakness, while her strength coiled tighter. The dining room's shadows stretched long, the lock symbol on the envelope a beacon, whispering of the bigger fight waiting to explode. "You're a ghost, Clara, fading fast," Evelyn sneered, her voice a venomous slash as she cornered Clara in the community center's empty hallway, her eyes glinting like sharpened steel. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain shot through her skull, her fingers tightening around the tarnished key in her pocket. The same key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the envelope she'd swiped from his briefcase. Her heart pounded, a war drum echoing his chilling words overheard that night. "She's out. The plan's working." Evelyn's presence, once cloaked in neighborly warmth, now loomed as a threat, her smile a mask peeled back to reveal a predator. Clara's pulse spiked, her nails digging into her palms as she realized Evelyn wasn't just Daniel's spy. She was a cog in a larger machine, one tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara stood her ground, her hazel eyes blazing, refusing to flinch as Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her words cutting. "You're not fit to lead that patent project," Evelyn hissed, her voice low, slicing through the air. "You're weak, Clara. Daniel's right to take over." Clara opened her mouth to retort, but Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't bother. Everyone sees you crumbling." The accusation landed like a fist, but Clara's chest burned with defiance, fueled by the memory of teaching Maya at the center, her resolve to protect her water purification patent for communities choked by pollution. She wasn't crumbling. She was waking up, her scientist mind piecing together the puzzle of Daniel's betrayal, now with Evelyn as his enforcer. Her fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges grounding her as Evelyn's gaze raked over her, searching for weakness. Clara's mind flashed to the envelope, its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, a clue to Daniel's plan to sell her patent to Klein's corporation. "I'm not weak," Clara snapped, her voice a blade, cutting Evelyn's smirk in half. "You don't know me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her lips curling, but Clara saw a flicker of doubt, a crack in her confidence. Evelyn leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Keep pushing, Clara, and you'll lose everything." The threat was a spark, igniting Clara's fury. She wouldn't lose. Not her work, not her voice, not to Daniel or his lackey. Clara's teeth ground harder, the ache anchoring her as she remembered Daniel's fake apology last night, his attempt to cage her with concern. Evelyn's role was clearer now, not just a nosy neighbor, but a spy feeding Daniel details, watching Clara's every move. Her visits, her muffins, her probing questions about Clara's health. They were all part of the plot to paint her as unstable, to steal her patent. Clara's pulse raced, her mind mapping the connections. The key, the envelope, Daniel's phone call, and now Evelyn's unveiled hostility. She needed to reach Elena, her old lab partner, to confirm her suspicions. But Evelyn's presence was a warning. Time was running out. Evelyn turned to leave, her heels clicking like a countdown, but Clara's voice stopped her cold. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her words sharp, a challenge. Evelyn paused, her back stiff, then glanced over her shoulder, her smile venomous. "You're not worth saving, Clara. Stay out of our way." The words cut deep, but Clara's resolve hardened, her fingers curling around the key, its weight a promise. She wouldn't stay out of their way, she'd tear their plan apart. As Evelyn disappeared down the hall, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist mind locking onto the next step. Contacting Elena, decoding the envelope, finding the truth. The community center's walls seemed to pulse, the lock symbol in her mind a beacon, urging her toward the bigger fight lurking in the shadows. "You're digging your own grave, Clara." Evelyn's voice echoed in Clara's mind, a venomous barb that fueled her as she slipped into a secluded corner of a Portland public library, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed, the tarnished key in her pocket a burning reminder of Daniel's betrayal. She'd overheard his chilling plan. She's out. The plan's working. The sealed envelope, snatched from his briefcase with its lock symbol matching her journal sketch, was now tucked in her bag, a ticking bomb of truth. Evelyn's unveiled hostility at the community center had confirmed her role as Daniel's spy, a cog in a larger scheme tied to Margaret Klein's corporate empire. Clara's pulse raced, her nails digging into her palms as she dialed Elena Torres, her old lab partner on a burner phone, her scientist mind razor-sharp, ready to unravel the web of lies. Elena's voice crackled through the line, steady but urgent. "Clara, you're not crazy. We'll get answers." Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope, its lock symbol a mirror of the key's promise. "Evelyn's with him," she whispered, her voice a blade, cutting through her fear. "She threatened me. They're after my patent." Elena didn't hesitate. "Meet Tom Reed, my investigator contact. He's already digging into Klein's company." Clara nodded, though Elena couldn't see, her resolve hardening like steel. She wasn't the fragile wife Daniel wanted. Her work, her water purification patent, was her fight for communities drowning in corporate greed, and she'd be damned if she let him steal it. At a dimly lit cafe across town, Clara met Tom, a wiry man with eyes like a hawk, his questions sharp as knives. "Daniel's routine. What's changed?" he asked, cutting off her attempt to explain the key. "Focus, Clara. Details." Her jaw tightened, the ache grounding her as she recounted Daniel's late-night calls, Evelyn's probing visits, the chemical tang of the tea. Tom's pen flew across his notebook, his nod curt. "Klein's corporation has a history of burying green tech. We need hard evidence." Clara slid the envelope across the table, her fingers steady despite her racing pulse. Tom's eyes narrowed, tracing the lock symbol. "This is big," he said, his voice low, a spark igniting in Clara's chest. She was on the right path, but Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, a warning of the danger closing in. Tom instructed Clara to collect a hair sample to test for poisoning. His words were a lifeline. Back home, with Daniel at work, Clara slipped into their bathroom, her hands shaking as she plucked strands from her brush, tucking them into a Ziploc bag. Every creak of the house sent her heart hammering, Evelyn's eyes flashing in her mind, watching from the shadows. She hid the bag in her journal, its pages now a war map, notes on the tea, the key, the envelope, and now the hair sample. Her teeth ground, the pain sharpening her focus as she recalled Daniel's fake apology, his attempt to cage her with concern. She wouldn't drink his tea again, wouldn't trust his smiles. Her scientist's mind was awake, piecing together the puzzle. The key, the lock symbol, Evelyn's role, Daniel's plan. Tom's next move was a recorder, a sleek device Clara planted in Daniel's office under the guise of bringing him coffee. Her hands trembled as she set the mug down, the recorder tucked in her sleeve. "You're up early," Daniel said, his voice a smooth blade, his eyes narrowing as she fumbled the spoon, bending to retrieve it. She slid the recorder under a stack of papers, her pulse a thunderclap, the lock symbol on the envelope flashing in her mind. "Just helping," she mumbled, her voice soft, playing the fragile wife. Daniel's smirk returned, but his gaze lingered, suspicious. She fled, her heart racing, the recorder a ticking bomb in his lair. Days later, Tom played the recording over a secure call. Clara and Elena huddled over the burner phone in a motel room, away from Evelyn's prying eyes. Daniel's voice filled the air, cold and precise, talking to Evelyn. "Klein's ready to pay. Once Clara's declared incompetent, the patent's ours." Evelyn's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "She's fading fast," Evelyn said, her words a mockery of Clara's strength. Clara's nails dug deeper, blood prickling her palms as fury surged. The recording confirmed her suspicions. Daniel and Evelyn were working with Margaret Klein to steal her patent, to bury her technology for profit. The key in her pocket felt heavier, its rusted edges a vow. She'd unlocked their lies. Tom's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "We need more. The envelope's a start, but we need Klein's contract." Clara nodded, her mind racing, mapping the next step. She'd mail the hair sample to Tom's lab, confirming the poison, and dig deeper into the envelope's contents. Her thoughts flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her eager eyes a reminder of why she fought. She wasn't just saving herself, she was saving her work, her legacy for communities like Maya's. Evelyn's threat echoed, but Clara's resolve was iron. She'd play Daniel's game, feign weakness, but her strength was sharpening, ready to cut through their web. As she hung up, her fingers brushed the key, the lock symbol in her journal a beacon, pulling her toward the truth waiting to explode. "You're nothing without me, Clara," Daniel's voice sneered in her memory, a vicious echo as Clara hunched over the burner phone in the motel room. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, its rusted edges a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the sealed envelope she'd stolen from his briefcase. A symbol matching the sketch in her journal, a rebellion against his betrayal. The recording she'd planted in his office, its chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Confirmed Daniel's plan with Evelyn and Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart pounded, a war drum fueling her fury as she and Elena pored over the envelope's contents, Tom Reed's voice crackling through the secure call. "Open it, Clara! Now!" he urged, his tone a blade cutting through her hesitation. Her nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her as she ripped the seal, her scientist's mind razor-sharp, ready to expose the truth. The envelope spilled its secrets, a contract, its pages crisp, damning, signed by Daniel and Margaret Klein, CEO of Klein Innovations. Clara's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she scanned the words. Terms to declare her mentally incompetent, transferring her patent rights to Klein's corporation for millions, ensuring her technology would be buried to protect their polluting empire. "They're killing communities," she whispered, her voice a snarl, her eyes blazing with rage. Elena's hand gripped hers, steady but fierce. "This is bigger than you, Clara. They've done this before." Tom's voice cut in, sharp as a whip. "Klein's buried green tech for years. Your patent threatens their profits." Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding harder, the ache a tether to her resolve. The key in her pocket, the lock symbol, the recording, they weren't just clues to Daniel's betrayal. They were threads in a corporate conspiracy poisoning the world she'd fought to save. Her mind flashed to Maya, the girl at the community center, her sketchbook filled with dreams of clean water. Clara's patent was for kids like her, for towns choked by corporate greed, and Daniel was selling it out. Her chest burned, fury surging as she read deeper into the contract. It outlined a plan to discredit her. Fake medical reports, Evelyn's testimony about her fragility, Daniel's manipulation of her exhaustion. "They planned this," she growled, her voice low, cutting through the motel's silence. Elena's eyes narrowed, her nod curt. "We've got them, Clara, but we need to move fast." Tom's voice crackled again, urgent. "Klein's got lawyers. They'll bury this unless we go public." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its weight a vow. She'd expose them no matter the cost. The contract revealed more. Klein's corporation had suppressed other technologies, buying patents to lock them away, leaving communities like Maya's to suffer. Clara's stomach twisted, the truth a physical blow. Daniel wasn't just betraying her. He was betraying the world, trading lives for profit. Her thoughts raced to the hair sample she'd sent Tom, the test confirming tetrotoxin poisoning, proof Daniel had drugged her to make her seem unstable. The recording, the envelope, the key, they were her arsenal, but the truth was her weapon. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's gaze locked onto hers, fierce. "You're not broken. You're their nightmare." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl, as she nodded, her resolve iron. Tom's plan was clear. Use the contract and recording at the upcoming Seattle Environmental Conference, where Klein would be speaking. Clara's heart thundered, the stakes higher than ever. Evelyn's threat, "Stay out of our way," loomed, her spying eyes a constant danger. Clara's fingers brushed the key, its rusted edges a promise to unlock the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence might hide. She'd play the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her mind was a furnace, forging a plan to shatter their lies. Her journal tucked in her bag held every detail. The T, the key, the lock symbol, the recording, and now this contract was the final piece. She thought of Maya's eager eyes, her own dreams buried under Daniel's control, and vowed to fight for them both. As Elena and Tom mapped the next steps, Clara stood, her hands steady, her scientist's mind plotting each move. The contract was a bombshell, but the conference would be her battlefield. Evelyn's role, Daniel's poison, Klein's greed. They'd underestimated her, and she'd make them pay. Her teeth ground, the ache fueling her as she slipped the contract back into her bag, the lock symbol a beacon in her mind. The motel room's shadows pulsed, the key in her pocket a ticking clock, whispering of the reckoning waiting to erupt. "You're a liability, Clara," Evelyn spat, her voice a venomous slash as she blocked Clara's path in the deserted Portland warehouse, her eyes glinting like a predator's in the dim light. Clara's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until pain seared her skull, her fingers clutching the tarnished key in her pocket. The key she'd stolen from Daniel, tied to the lock symbol on the contract that exposed his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. The recording she'd planted, Daniel's chilling words, "She's fading fast, the patent's ours," and the hair sample confirming tetrotoxin poisoning burned in her mind, fueling her fury. Evelyn's threat at the community center, "Stay out of our way," had lured Clara here under the pretense of answers. But now two hired thugs flanked Evelyn, their fists curled, their presence a physical threat. Clara's pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind raced, calculating her escape. Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown, her smirk a blade. "You should have stayed down, Clara." Weak, like Daniel said. Clara's chest burned, her breath sharp as she snapped, "I'm not weak." Evelyn cut her off, her hands slashing the air. "Don't talk. You're done." The thugs advanced, one grabbing Clara's arm, his grip iron, twisting until her shoulder screamed. She yanked free, her heart hammering, her eyes darting for an exit. The warehouse's shadows loomed, but Clara's mind was a furnace, flashing to Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water tied to Clara's patent. She wouldn't let Evelyn, Daniel, or Klein's goons bury her work, or her. "You're in too deep," Evelyn hissed, her voice a knife, cutting off Clara's attempt to speak. "Klein's paying big to keep your tech locked away. You're just collateral." Clara's fury surged, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against the fear. The contract she'd found, the lock symbol matching her journal's sketch, revealed Klein's history of suppressing green tech. And Evelyn was their enforcer, not just a spy. Clara's fingers tightened on the key, its rusted edges biting her skin, a vow to fight for the communities her patent could save. She lunged toward a stack of crates, dodging a thug's grab, her body moving on instinct. "You can't stop me," she snarled, her voice a blade slicing through Evelyn's smirk. The second thug charged, his fist swinging, but Clara ducked, her scientist's precision guiding her. She grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, her hands steady despite the pain shooting through her arm. "Back off!" she shouted, swinging the pipe, her eyes blazing. Evelyn laughed, a cold mocking sound, but her gaze flickered with doubt as Clara stood her ground. The thugs hesitated, their fists still raised, and Clara's mind raced, mapping the warehouse's layout, searching for a way out. The key in her pocket was her anchor, tied to the safe in Daniel's office, where more evidence waited. She needed to survive this, to reach Elena and Tom, to expose Klein's conspiracy at the Seattle conference. Evelyn's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Finish her!" she barked, her composure cracking. The thugs lunged, but Clara swung the pipe again, connecting with one's knee, his grunt echoing as he stumbled. She bolted toward a side door, her heart a war drum, her legs burning as she dodged crates. Evelyn's scream followed, "You'll regret this!" But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on the contract, the recording, the hair sample. She'd played Daniel's fragile wife, but here, in this trap, she was a fighter. The door was steps away, but a thug's hand grazed her shoulder, yanking her back. Clara twisted, her elbow slamming into his jaw, her fury a wildfire. She burst through the door, her breath ragged, the key in her pocket a ticking bomb, promising a reckoning as she ran into the night. Evelyn's threats echoing behind her. "You'll never outrun us, Clara." Evelyn's scream echoed in Clara's ears as she stumbled through Portland's back alleys, her lungs burning, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The tarnished key in her pocket bit into her thigh, a lifeline tying her to the lock symbol on the contract she'd stolen from Daniel's briefcase, proof of his plan with Margaret Klein to steal her water purification patent. Her heart thundered, each beat a war drum as she replayed the warehouse ambush. Evelyn's thugs nearly crushing her, her desperate escape fueled by the recording's chilling words. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." The hair sample confirming tetrotoxin poisoning and the contract exposing Klein's corporate greed were her weapons. But she needed more. Irrefutable evidence to bury them at the Seattle conference. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist mind raced, plotting her next move. Clara ducked into a shadowed doorway, her breath ragged, her eyes scanning for Elena's car. Her old lab partner's voice had been a lifeline on the burner phone minutes ago. "Get to Daniel's office. The key's your shot." Clara's fingers curled around the key, its rusted edges grounding her against the fear. The warehouse fight had left her bruised, her shoulders screaming from the thug's grip. But her resolve was iron. She'd fought for Maya, the girl at the community center, for communities choking on corporate pollution. Her patent was their salvation, and she wouldn't let Daniel or Evelyn steal it. A car screeched to a stop, Elena's face sharp behind the wheel, Tom Reed in the passenger seat, his hawk-like eyes locked on her. "Move!" Elena snapped, her voice a blade, cutting through Clara's hesitation. Clara dove into the back seat, her pulse hammering as Elena floored the gas, tires squealing. "They're tailing us," Tom barked, his head craning to check the rear view. Clara's stomach twisted. Evelyn's threat. "You'll regret this," ringing in her skull. She clutched the key, her mind flashing to the lock symbol, the contract's damning words. Daniel and Klein's plan to declare her incompetent, to bury her tech for profit. "The safe in his office," Clara said, her voice a snarl, cutting through the car's tension. "The key fits it. There's more evidence." Tom nodded, his pen flying across a notebook, his words sharp. "We get the safe's contents. We've got them cold." Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she pictured Daniel's smug face, his fake concern caging her for years. They reached Daniel's law firm, its glass facade looming, but the late hour left it empty. Clara led the way, her hands trembling but steady, the key her guide. The office was dark, Daniel's desk a fortress of secrets. She knelt, her fingers probing for the safe, her pulse a thunderclap as she found it hidden beneath a panel. The key slid in, the lock clicking open with a sound like a gunshot. Her breath hitched, her scientist's precision guiding her as she pulled out a flash drive and a stack of documents. Tom's eyes narrowed, scanning the pages, his voice low. Emails between Daniel and Klein, dates, payments, a video file. Clara's heart surged, her fury a wildfire as she plugged the drive into Tom's laptop, her hands steady despite the bruises on her knuckles. The video loaded, Daniel's face filling the screen, his voice cold, precise, speaking to Klein. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Klein's laugh was a knife twisting in Clara's chest. "Good. No one'll miss her tech, or her," she said, her words a mockery of Clara's fight. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on a hidden camera Clara hadn't known existed. Her nails dug deeper, blood welling, as rage surged. "They taped it," she growled, her voice a blade, slicing through her fear. Elena's hand gripped her shoulder, fierce. "This is your silver bullet, Clara." Tom nodded, his eyes blazing. "We take this to the conference. They're done." Clara's mind raced, mapping the plan. The Seattle conference was tomorrow. Klein's keynote on their stage. The video, the contract, the hair sample. They were her arsenal, but Evelyn's thugs were still out there. And Daniel's suspicion was growing. She thought of Maya's sketchbook, her dreams of clean water, and her resolve hardened. "They thought I'd break," she said, her voice low, cutting through the office's silence. Tom's gaze met hers sharp. "They underestimated you. Let's move." Clara tucked the flash drive into her pocket, the key beside it, its weight a vow. She'd played the fragile wife, let Daniel think he'd won, but her strength was a coiled spring, ready to snap. As they slipped out, headlights flashed outside, Evelyn's car idling in the lot. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she ducked behind a desk, Elena and Tom crouching beside her. "She's tracking us," Elena whispered, her voice a hiss. Clara's fingers curled around the flash drive, the lock symbol in her journal flashing in her mind. A beacon of truth. They needed to reach the conference, to expose Daniel and Klein before Evelyn's goons closed in. Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind plotting each step, her fury a furnace. The video was her weapon, but the stakes were higher now. Evelyn's pursuit, Daniel's lies, Klein's greed. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for herself. The office's shadows pulsed, the flash drive in her pocket a ticking bomb, whispering of the showdown waiting to erupt. "You're finished, Clara," Daniel hissed, his voice a venomous blade as he seized the microphone at the Seattle Environmental Conference. His tailored suit a stark contrast to the raw menace in his eyes. Clara stood at his side, her hand trembling in his grip, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, playing the frail wife he expected. The tarnished key in her pocket burned, tying her to the lock symbol on the stolen contract, the flash drive with the damning video, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin poisoning, her arsenal against his betrayal, overheard that night. "She's fading fast. The patent's ours." Evelyn's thugs had nearly crushed her in the warehouse, but the video from Daniel's safe, showing him drugging her tea, was her silver bullet, ready to fire. Her pulse thundered, her nails digging into her palms, blood prickling as her scientist's mind sharpened, poised for the kill. Daniel's voice boomed, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "My wife's struggling," he said, his tone heavy with false concern, his eyes glinting with triumph. "She needs care, a hospital stay." The audience of scientists and activists gasped, their pity a wave crashing over Clara, but her chest burned with fury, fueled by Maya's dreams of clean water, her patent's promise to save communities. "Don't speak for me," she snapped, her voice a whip, slicing his words in half. Daniel's grip tightened, his smile faltering, but he cut her off, his voice sharp. "You're confused, Clara. Let me handle this." The crowd leaned in, their eyes on her, but Clara's gaze flicked to Elena, near a marble pillar, her nod a lifeline, signaling the plan was live. Clara yanked her hand free, her heart hammering, and strode to the stage, each step shedding her fragility. "Enough lies," she growled, snatching the microphone from Daniel's hand, her eyes blazing, his face drained of color, his mouth opening. But she cut him off, her voice a blade. "You architected betrayal, Daniel, not love." The crowd stilled, their breath held as Clara signaled Elena. The massive screen behind her flickered, Tom Reed's tech overriding the feed. Daniel's voice filled the room, cold and precise from the video. "The poison's slow. She'll be out by the conference. The patent's yours." Margaret Klein's laugh followed, a knife in Clara's chest. "No one'll miss her tech. Or her." Gaffs erupted, the audience's eyes darting to Daniel and Klein. Seated in the front row, her face paling. The footage shifted, showing Daniel slipping a pill into Clara's tea, his movements deliberate, caught on the hidden camera from his safe. Evelyn, in the crowd, froze, her smug smile collapsing as her spying role flashed on screen. Emails exposing her as Klein's informant. Clara's teeth ground, the ache anchoring her as she faced the crowd, her voice clear, cutting. "They poisoned me to steal my patent, to bury clean water for profit." Daniel lunged, his voice a snarl. "That's fake." But Elena stepped forward, blocking his path, her eyes fierce. "It's real," Clara said, her words a hammer, smashing his facade. Klein stood, her composure crumbling, but Clara's gaze pinned her, unwavering. "You thought I was a ghost," she said, her voice iron. "But I'm here, and I remember." The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts, their shock a validation of Clara's truth. Daniel's eyes blazed, his voice a desperate hiss. "You'll pay for this." But Clara stood tall, her scientist mind a fortress, her fury a wildfire. The hair sample, the contract, the video, they were her proof, and the crowd was her jury. Elena's hand grazed her shoulder, a quiet strength, as Tom's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece. "Cops are here!" Police surged through the doors, their steps steady, cuffs gleaming. "Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein," an officer barked. "You're under arrest." Daniel's face twisted, his snarl a final claw at Clara's resolve. But she held his gaze, her heart steady, the key in her pocket, a vow fulfilled. Klein's head bowed, her empire crumbling, as Evelyn slipped toward the exit, her betrayal laid bare. Clara's voice rose, addressing the crowd. "This patent is for you, for communities fighting for clean water." The audience roared, their awe replacing pity, her strength a beacon. Daniel's threat echoed, "You'll pay." But Clara's resolve was iron, her thoughts on Maya, on the communities her work would save. The screen looped the video, a relentless truth, as Clara stepped back, her breath steady, her scientist's mind plotting the next fight. The conference hall pulsed, the tarnished key in her pocket a silent promise, whispering of the justice still to come. "You'll pay, Clara," Daniel's snarl echoed in her mind, a venomous claw as Clara stood in the Portland courtroom, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. The tarnished key now on a chain around her neck, pressed against her skin, a reminder of the lock symbol on the contract, the video exposing Daniel's poisoning, and the hair sample confirming tetrodotoxin. Her arsenal that shattered his plan at the Seattle conference. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced the judge, her scientist mind sharp, her resolve iron. Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn sat in the dock, their faces pale, their empires crumbling under the weight of her truth. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she recalled Daniel's chilling words overheard that night. She's fading fast, the patent's ours. She hadn't faded. She'd ignited. The judge's gavel cracked, a sound like a gunshot as he read the verdict. Daniel Harper, Margaret Klein, guilty of conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, but Clara stood tall, her hazel eyes blazing, her voice silent, but her presence a blade. Daniel's gaze met hers, his eyes burning with defiance, but she didn't flinch. "You thought you'd erase me," she whispered under her breath, her words a vow cutting through the air. Klein's head bowed, her corporate mask shattered, while Evelyn's smug smirk was gone, her role as spy laid bare by the video and emails shown at the conference. The judge continued, his voice stern. "The patent is restored to Clara Bennett. Klein Innovations is under investigation." Clara's chest surged, her fury cooling into triumph. Her work, her water purification patent, returned to her hands. Daniel lunged forward, his voice a desperate hiss. "This isn't over!" The bailiff grabbed him, cuffs gleaming, but Clara's gaze held steady, her teeth grinding, the ache anchoring her. "It is for you," she said, her voice low, a final slash. The contract, the video, the hair sample, they'd been her weapons, and the courtroom was her battlefield. Every loose end tied, Evelyn's financial motives exposed, Klein's greed dismantled, Daniel's betrayal punished. The crowd murmured, their awe replacing the pity she'd endured at the conference. Clara's fingers brushed the key on her chain, its rusted edges a symbol of her unlocked strength. She thought of Maya, the girl at the community center, her dreams of clean water now within reach because of Clara's fight. As Daniel was led away, his snarl fading, Clara's breath steadied, her scientist's mind already turning to the future. The patent was hers, but the fight wasn't just for her. It was for communities choking on corporate pollution. Elena, standing beside her, squeezed her hand, her eyes fierce. "You did it," she said, her voice a spark. Tom Reed nodded from the back, his hawk-like gaze softening with respect. Clara's resolve hardened, her heart a furnace, as she vowed to use her victory to build something greater. The courtroom doors swung open, the crowd parting, their whispers now of admiration, not doubt. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet promise of the legacy she'd forge, a beacon whispering of the hope waiting to rise. "You broke her, Daniel, but she rebuilt the world." Elena's voice sliced through the courtroom's tension, her words a fierce jab as Clara stood beside her, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain seared her skull. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrodotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed Daniel, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent. But his final snarl, "This isn't over," lingered like a shadow. Her heart pounded, a steady drum, as she faced Daniel one last time, his cuffs gleaming, his eyes burning with defiance. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as her scientist's mind churned, not with fear but with purpose. She'd turn her pain into hope. Daniel's voice cracked, his polished mask shattered as he spoke from the dock. "I was wrong, Clara," he said, his tone low, raw, a confession forced by her courtroom triumph. I'll make it right." Her eyes narrowed, her teeth grinding harder, the ache anchoring her against his words. She didn't trust him, not after his lies. His pill slipped into her tea, his plan to steal her patent for Klein's empire. But his next move stunned her. He leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "My firm's profits, they're yours, for clean water." The crowd gasped, the judge's gavel hovering, as Daniel's lawyer confirmed. Millions redirected to fund water initiatives. Clara's chest surged, Not with forgiveness, but with possibility, her fury cooling into resolve. She wouldn't take his money. She'd use it to save lives. Clara strode from the courtroom, Elena at her side, her steps deliberate, her scientist mind already mapping her next move. She'd launch the Bennett Clean Water Initiative, distributing her patents technology to communities choked by corporate pollution. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight a vow. She'd build something Daniel couldn't touch. At a Portland community center, she announced the initiative, her voice clear, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "This is for you," she said, her eyes locking onto Maya, the girl whose sketchbook held dreams of clean water. "For every town fighting for a future." The crowd roared, their hands clapping, their faces alight. But Clara's pulse spiked, Evelyn's spying eyes flashing in her memory, a reminder of the fight she'd endured. She moved to her new lab, a sunlit space she'd leased far from Daniel's sterile cage. Her hands steadied, signing contracts to send purification systems to rural towns, her scientist's precision guiding each step. Maya's mother, a single parent from a polluted district, approached, her voice trembling. "You saved us," she said, handing Clara a letter from her town, their water now clean. Clara's throat tightened, her fingers curling around the key, its rusted edges a reminder of her journey, from the T, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of impact. "It's just the start," Clara said, her voice a blade slicing through doubt. She wouldn't stop, not for Maya, not for the millions her patent could reach. Elena joined her eyes fierce. "You're changing the game," she said, her hand gripping Clara's shoulder, a spark of their old lab days. Tom Reed's text pinged, news of Klein's company collapsing under scrutiny, a ripple from Clara's victory. Her heart surged, her resolve iron as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the lives it would save. At the lab, she pinned the letter from Maya's town to a board, next to her journal, its pages once filled with suspicions, now a record of triumph. "This is hope," she said, her voice low, addressing the team assembling her systems. "We build it together." Their nods were fuel, their hands moving with purpose, her patent no longer a target but a beacon. Clara's teeth ground, the ache a reminder of her fight as she signed another contract, her hands steady. Daniel's money would fund systems for a dozen towns, but her initiative was hers, born from her pain, her defiance. She thought of the community center, Maya's eager eyes, and vowed to mentor others, to give them the voice Daniel tried to silence. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a symbol of her unlocked strength. The lab buzzed, her team's energy a pulse, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her scientist's mind plotting ahead. She'd protect her legacy, her purpose. The letter on the board fluttered, a quiet promise, whispering of the lives she'd touch, the hope she'd forge from the ashes of betrayal. "You can't erase me, Daniel," Clara whispered, her voice a fierce blade as she stood in her sunlit Portland lab, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding until pain anchored her resolve. The tarnished key hung around her neck, its rusted edges pressing into her skin, a symbol of the lock she'd opened. Daniel's betrayal, exposed by the contract, the video of him poisoning her tea, and the hair sample proving tetrotoxin. The courtroom verdict had crushed him, Margaret Klein, and Evelyn, restoring Clara's water purification patent, while Daniel's donation of his firm's profits fueled her Bennett Clean Water Initiative. His final snarl, "This isn't over," echoed faintly, but Clara's heart pounded, a war drum, as she leaned over her drafting table, her scientist's mind blazing with purpose. Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling, as she sketched a new purification system, her legacy for communities like Maya's, the girl whose dreams fueled her fight. Clara's pencil moved with precision, each line a vow to rebuild what Daniel tried to destroy. The lab buzzed, her team assembling systems for towns choking on corporate pollution, their hands moving with the same fire she felt. Maya, the 12-year-old from the community center, stood beside her, her sketchbook open, her pencil tracing a filtered design Clara had refined. "It'll work now," Maya said, her eyes bright, her voice a spark. Clara's chest surged, her throat tightening as she nodded. "You made it better," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the lab's hum. Maya's grin was a mirror of Clara's younger self, the scientist who dreamed big before Daniel's lies caged her. Her fingers brushed the key, its weight lighter now, a reminder of her journey, from the poison tea, the lock symbol, the video, to this moment of rebirth. Elena burst through the door, her eyes fierce, holding a letter from a rural Oregon town. "They've got clean water, Clara, because of you." She thrust the paper into Clara's hands, her grip a lifeline, their old lab days flashing in her nod. Clara's pulse spiked, her teeth grinding as she read the words. A community of 500, free from polluted wells. Thanking her initiative. Her heart swelled, her fury cooling into purpose as she pinned the letter above her desk, next to her journal. Once a record of Daniel's betrayal, now a testament to her triumph. "This is why we fight," she said, her voice a blade slicing through doubt. The team cheered, their hands clapping, their faces alight, but Clara's mind flashed to Maya's mother, her gratitude in the courtroom, a spark that fueled her mission. Tom Reed's text pinged, his words sharp. "Klein's assets seized. You changed the game." Clara's lips curled, a silent snarl as she thought of Daniel's donation, his attempt at redemption. She didn't care about his guilt. She cared about the towns it would save. Her hands steadied, signing a contract to send systems to 5 more communities, her scientist's precision guiding each stroke. "For them," she said, her voice low, addressing Maya, who clutched her sketchbook, her eyes wide. "Your designs will do this too." Maya's nod was fierce, her pencil moving faster, and Clara's chest tightened, pride surging. She'd been Daniel's ghost, but now she was their beacon, her patent a lifeline for millions. The lab's energy pulsed, her team's hands assembling filters, but Daniel's threat lingered, a faint shadow. Clara's gaze hardened, her fingers brushing the key as she recalled Evelyn's spying eyes, Klein's greed, the warehouse ambush. She'd survived, but vigilance was her armor. She moved to a board, pinning Maya's sketch next to the letter, her voice clear. "Your voice is your strength," she told Maya, her words a vow, echoing her own fight. "Never let it be silenced." Maya's eyes brimmed, mirroring Clara's journey, and Clara's heart steadied, her resolve iron. She thought of the community center, her journal's suspicions, the key's promise, each a step to this moment, where her pain became purpose. A knock interrupted, and Elena led in a young scientist, Lila, her hands nervous around a prototype. I want to join," Lila said, her voice trembling but fierce. Clara's gaze softened, her scientist's mind seeing her younger self in Lila's fire. "Show me," she said, her voice a spark, guiding Lila to the table. They worked, Clara's hands steady, refining Lila's design, her words sharp. "Your ideas matter. Fight for them." Lila's nod was aflame, and Clara's chest surged, her legacy growing. The letter from the Oregon town pinned above was a testament, but Lila's prototype, Maya's sketch, her team's work, they were her new family, forged in the fire of her fight. Clara stepped back, her pencil hovering, as a bottle of ink tipped, spilling black across her sketch. Her breath hitched, the old panic flaring, Daniel's tea, the poison, the journal's lock symbol. But she stopped, her fingers tracing the spill, dipping her pencil into the mess. She wove the ink into her design, the dark streaks becoming pipes, channels, a symbol of scars transformed. Her teeth ground, the ache a vow as she finished the sketch, a purification system for a town like Maya's. "Pain builds strength," she said, her voice low, addressing her team, their nods fuel. Elena's eyes gleamed, her hand squeezing Clara's shoulder. "Your hope," she said, her words a spark. The lab's hum softened, Clara's gaze lingering on the letter, the key, Maya's sketch. Daniel's threat echoed, but it held no power. She'd burned her journal, its suspicions now ashes, replaced by this lab, this purpose. Lila's prototype hummed, Maya's pencil moved, and Clara's heart steadied, her scientist's mind plotting new systems, new lives. She stepped outside, the Portland skyline glowing, her hands steady as she held her pencil. No longer Daniel's tool, but hers. The moral burned clear. Your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced. It tied her journey, Daniel's betrayal, Elena's loyalty, Maya's dreams, Lila's fire, into a legacy of hope. Clara returned to her desk, her fingers adding one final line to the sketch. A pipe wide and open for communities needing it. The lab's light spilled onto the street, a beacon in the dusk. She closed her sketchbook, her smile quiet but unshakable, her team around her, her new family forging a future. Daniel's voice, Klein's greed, Evelyn's betrayal, they were ghosts fading in her strength. She wasn't the woman who'd collapsed under poison, but Clara, architect of her future, her blueprint reclaimed. The key around her neck gleamed, a quiet vow, whispering of the lives she'd build, the hope she'd leave behind. Clara's journey teaches us that your voice is your strength. Never let it be silenced, no matter how deep the betrayal. Her fight from a poisoned cup to a reclaimed legacy shows the power of resilience and truth. What did Clara's defiance stir in you? A memory, a feeling, a fire of your own? Share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from, and what moment hit you hardest? Your story matters just like hers. Thank you for joining us through every twist and heartbeat of this tale. Your support lights our path, and we're so grateful. Stay tuned for more stories of courage and truth. We'll see you in the next chapter. Keep building your own blueprint. Maya Johnson's hands tremble on the silver tray. The weight of the gumbo bowls, nothing compared to the eyes boring into her. Your stench is filthy, girl, Evelyn Hawthorne snaps, her manicured hands snapping up to cover her nose, voice slicing through the chatter of Savannah's elite. The gala, held at the Hawthorne estate, hums with clinking glasses and sharp laughter. But Evelyn's words cut deeper, a blade aimed at Maya's core. At 27, Maya, a black server, pours her low-country heritage into every dish, her mother's gumbo recipe a defiant pulse of pride. Her white apron, crisp against her dark skin, feels like a target now, the small notebook tucked in its pocket, her dream of writing Southern folk tales, her only shield. Subscribe now to catch every pulse-pounding second of this heartwarming tale, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Stay glued. Her story flips everything upside down. Let me know if you want any tweaks to the intro or if you'd like me to proceed with another task, such as writing a specific scene, adding narration cues, or refining other video elements. Evelyn, 65, matriarch of the Hawthorne dynasty, stands tall in a cream silk dress, her gray eyes glinting with control. Her nose-wrinkling gesture isn't subtle, it's a performance, meant to pin Maya as an outsider in this gilded crowd. "You're tainting our air," Evelyn hisses, her hands still clamped over her face, fingers splayed like a gatekeeper barring entry. Maya's jaw tightens, teeth grinding until her temples throb. She wants to hurl the tray, let the gumbo splash across Evelyn's pristine dress, but her mother's voice echoes. "Stand tall, always." The crowd shifts, some whispering, others staring, their tailored suits and pearl necklaces a wall of judgment. A young guest, phone in hand, captures the moment, his thumb already hovering over a share button. "You heard me," Evelyn cuts in before Maya can speak, her voice a whip. "This isn't your place." The words land like blows, each one heavier, meant to crush. Maya's fingers curl around the tray's edge, knuckles whitening, her heartbeat a drum in her chest. She catches a glimpse of her reflection in the polished silver, a woman who's fought for every inch of respect, now reduced to a spectacle. Her notebook presses against her hip, a quiet vow of her worth, but the sting of Evelyn's words burns hotter. "Step back," Evelyn orders, waving a hand as if shooing a pest. The crowd parts, leaving Maya exposed, a lone figure under the shadow of a Spanish moss-draped oak. A man in a seersucker suit mutters to his wife, "She doesn't belong here." His wife nods, her lips pursed, but a younger woman nearby hesitates, her eyes flicking to Maya with a flicker of doubt. Maya's chest heaves, her breath shallow, but she forces her spine straight. She won't crumble. Not here, not now. Evelyn steps closer, her perfume a cloying cloud, and leans in, voice low but venomous. "Know your place, girl." The insult sears, a brand on Maya's pride. but her mother's gumbo, steaming on the tray, anchors her. It's more than food. It's her roots, her fight, her story. The phone-wielding guest uploads the clip, and murmurs ripple through the crowd, a chain reaction of whispers. Maya's ears catch fragments. Disgraceful. Too bold for a server. Her pulse races, but she locks eyes with Evelyn, refusing to blink. The matriarch's smirk falters for a split second, a crack in her armor, but she recovers, turning to the crowd with a practiced smile. "Let's move on," she declares, dismissing Maya like dust. Maya's hands shake, but she holds the tray steady, her resolve a fire no insult can douse. She steps back, not in defeat, but to regroup, her notebook a silent promise of retribution. The oak looms above, its moss swaying, whispering of a storm yet to break. Maya Johnson's feet carry her to the edge of the Hawthorne Gala, away from Evelyn's venomous words, her pulse hammering like a war drum. The silver tray, still clutched in her hands, trembles with the weight of her mother's gumbo. Each bowl a piece of her low-country soul. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding so hard her temples pulse, but she won't let tears fall, not here, not under the eyes of Savannah's elite. Evelyn's insult, "Your stench is filthy, girl," echoes in her skull, a blade twisting deeper with every step. The crowd's whispers chase her, their tailored suits and glittering jewels a blur of judgment. But her white apron, stained with a speck of gumbo, feels like armor. Tucked in its pocket, her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her mother's voice. "You are enough." She stops near a shadowed corner of the garden, the Spanish moss-draped oak looming overhead, its branches a silent witness. "Know your place," Evelyn had sneered, her hand still raised to her nose, a gesture that branded Maya as less than human. The memory ignites a fire in her chest, her breath hitching, but she forces it steady. "I belong here," she whispers to herself, voice low, a vow carved from rage and pride. Her fingers brush the notebook, its worn pages holding stories of ancestors who endured worse, chains, whips, erasure, and still rose. She won't break, not for Evelyn, not for anyone. A guest, a woman in a pearl-encrusted dress, brushes past, muttering, "She should have stayed in the kitchen." The words sting, but Maya's eyes blaze, locking onto the woman's back. She wants to shout, to demand respect, but her mother taught her better. Words cut deeper when they're sharp and true. She straightens, shoulders squared, and turns to face the crowd, her dark eyes sweeping over them like a challenge. "My heritage isn't dirty," she says, voice steady, slicing through the hum of chatter. "It's the blood in Savannah's veins." The words land like a thrown gauntlet, silencing a cluster of guests nearby. A young man, phone still in hand from filming Evelyn's attack, pauses, his thumb frozen over the screen, eyes wide with surprise. Evelyn, watching from the center of the gala, stiffens, her cream silk dress catching the light as her smirk fades. "Don't speak out of turn," she snaps, voice a razor, cutting off Maya's next breath. But Maya's lips curl, not into a smile, but a defiance that burns. "I'm not your servant, Mrs. Hawthorne," she fires back, each syllable a spark. "I'm Maya Johnson, and my story's worth more than your name." The crowd gasps, a ripple of shock spreading, some clutching their glasses tighter, others leaning closer, caught by her fire. The young man's phone tilts, capturing every word, his fingers itching to share. Maya's heart pounds, her hands steadying the tray as if it's her anchor. The notebook in her pocket feels heavier, its stories urging her to stand taller. She steps forward, refusing to shrink, her apron a banner of her resolve. Evelyn's eyes narrow, a predator sensing a fight, but Maya meets her gaze, unyielding. "You can't erase me," she says, voice low but thunderous, a promise to herself and the ancestors in her tales. The crowd shifts, some nodding, others whispering, the air thick with tension. The young man uploads the clip, and the murmurs grow louder, a spark ready to ignite. Maya turns, tray still in hand, and walks toward the kitchen, her steps deliberate, each one a reclaiming of her space. The oak's moss sways above, a silent cheer for her defiance. But as she moves, a folded paper slips from a passing server's tray, landing at her feet, its edge marked with a single word: truth. Her pulse spikes, fingers itching to grab it, sensing a storm brewing beyond Evelyn's cruelty. Evelyn Hawthorne's fingers tighten around her crystal flute, the champagne untouched, her gray eyes darting across the gala's crowd. Maya's words, "My story's worth more than your name," echo like a slap, lingering in the air as guests murmur, their glances sharp with curiosity. Evelyn's cream silk dress feels too tight, her chest constricting as she forces a smile, her polished facade cracking. She strides to the center of the Hawthorne Estates lawn, where the elite of Savannah clink glasses, their tailored suits and diamond earrings glinting under the soft glow of string lights. Her nose-wrinkling insult, calling Maya filthy, was meant to crush, but Maya's defiance has turned heads, and Evelyn feels the weight of those eyes judging her. A guest, a local chef with a grizzled beard, approaches, his voice gruff but earnest. "That gumbo," he says, nodding toward the table where Maya's bowls sit, steaming with low-country soul. "It's the best thing here, pure Savannah." Evelyn's lips purse, her knuckles whitening on the flute. The praise stings, a jab at her calculated attack on Maya. She waves him off, her hand slicing the air. "It's just food," she snaps, but her voice wavers, betraying a flicker of doubt. The chef shrugs, his eyes narrowing, and walks away, leaving Evelyn alone with the hum of the crowd. Her pulse quickens, her teeth grinding as she scans the faces. Some whisper, others sip their drinks, but all seem to weigh her actions. She steps toward the gumbo table, her heels clicking like a metronome, and stares at the bowls. The rich, earthy scent hits her, a reminder of Maya's heritage, the one she tried to erase. Her stomach twists, not with hunger, but with unease. She'd expected compliance, not resistance, and certainly not applause for a server's dish. A young woman in a sequined dress leans over, taking a bowl, and murmurs to her friend, "This is incredible. Who made it?" Evelyn's jaw clenches, her fingers itching to snatch the bowl away, but she freezes as the woman adds, "They said it's the black girl's recipe. She's got guts." The words burn, a quiet rebellion against Evelyn's control, and her breath catches, her facade teetering. A server, rushing past with a tray, stumbles, and a folded paper flutters to the ground near Evelyn's feet. She snatches it up, her nails digging into the edges, expecting a stray napkin. Instead, scrawled in sharp ink, is a single word: truth. Her pulse spikes, her eyes darting to the crowd, searching for the source. "Who dropped this?" she demands, voice low but sharp, cutting through the nearby chatter. The server shrugs, scurrying off, leaving Evelyn clutching the note. Her mind races. Truth? About what? The paper feels heavy, a splinter in her polished world, hinting at something buried, something tied to her family's legacy. She tucks it into her clutch, her fingers trembling, but her face hardens, refusing to show weakness. The crowd's murmurs grow, a few guests glancing at their phones, where Maya's defiant words are already spreading through whispered gossip. Evelyn's throat tightens, her teeth pressing so hard her jaw aches. She'd meant to bury Maya, but the girl's fire has sparked something else, a crack in the Hawthorne name. She turns, her eyes scanning for Maya, who's vanished into the kitchen, her absence louder than her presence. The chef's praise, the note, the crowd's shifting loyalty, they claw at Evelyn's control, planting a seed of regret she can't shake. She steps forward, her heels sinking into the grass, determined to regain her grip. But the paper in her clutch burns like a fuse, promising secrets she can't yet face. "You think you can shame me, girl?" Evelyn Hawthorne's voice cuts like a blade, her gray eyes blazing as she corners Maya Johnson in the Hawthorne Estate's bustling kitchen. The clatter of dishes and the hum of servers fade under her presence, her cream silk dress a stark contrast to Maya's white apron, now flecked with gumbo stains. Evelyn's insult at the gala, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, still burns, amplified by the whispers of Savannah's elite and the photo snapped by a guest. The mysterious note, truth, tucked in Evelyn's clutch, gnaws at her, a splinter in her control. Her fingers grip the countertop, nails digging into the marble, as she fights the unease sparked by the chef's praise for Maya's gumbo and the crowd's shifting glances. Maya, 27, stands firm, her hands steady on a stack of plates, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a quiet anchor to her pride. "I don't want your shame, Mrs. Hawthorne," she fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance. "I want respect." Evelyn's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence Maya. "Respect is earned," she snaps, cutting her off. "You're a server, not family." The words sting, but Maya's eyes don't waver, her dark gaze locking onto Evelyn's, a challenge that makes the matriarch's pulse spike. The kitchen staff pause, their glances darting, sensing the storm. Evelyn steps closer, her perfume a suffocating cloud, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You've stirred trouble," she says, her fingers twitching toward her clutch, where the note lies. "That gumbo nonsense. People are talking." Maya's chest tightens, her breath hitching, but she holds her ground, her fingers brushing the notebook. "Good," she retorts, her voice a spark. "Let them talk about my heritage." Evelyn's face hardens, her teeth grinding, but the chef's words, "pure savannah," echo in her mind, a crack in her certainty. She'd meant to crush Maya, but the girl's fire is turning heads and the note's warning, truth, claws at her thoughts. She pivots, her heels clicking toward the kitchen door, but pauses, her hand hovering over the handle. "Stay out of my way," she warns, her voice a low growl, but her eyes flicker with doubt. Maya doesn't flinch, her hands stacking plates with deliberate force, each clink a rebellion. "I'm not hiding," she says, her tone cutting, her eyes burning with the memory of her mother's tales. Stories of ancestors who faced worse and stood taller. Evelyn's fingers tighten on her clutch, the note's weight pulling at her. She storms out, her silk dress swishing, but her steps falter as she overhears a guest outside, a woman in pearls, say, "That server's dish outshines everything here." Evelyn's throat constricts, her pulse racing as she slips into the estate's library, seeking solitude. She pulls the note from her clutch, staring at the scrawled truth, her nails biting into her palm. Her mind races. What truth? She grabs a leather-bound book on Savannah history from a shelf, flipping through it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning for answers. A faded note slips out, mentioning a land deal tied to the Hawthorne name, dated decades ago. Her breath catches, her heart pounding as she shoves it back, refusing to face it. But the chef's praise, the crowd's murmurs, and Maya's unyielding defiance gnaw at her, a chain of cracks in her iron grip. She heads back toward the gala, her heels echoing in the hall, determined to regain control. But as she passes a mirror, her reflection shows a woman unraveling, her gray eyes haunted by the note's promise. Maya's words, "My story's worth more than your name," ring in her ears, a challenge she can't ignore. She clenches her fists, her resolve hardening, but the library's shadows linger, whispering of secrets buried in the Hawthorne legacy, secrets that could burn her world to ash. "You think I'll break, Mrs. Hawthorne?" Maya Johnson mutters under her breath, her voice a low growl as she shoves a stack of plates into the kitchen sink. Evelyn's half-hearted apology, "I may have been too harsh," still burns, a hollow gesture that tried to cage her spirit. Her white apron, flecked with gumbo stains, clings to her frame, a badge of her fight at the Hawthorne Gala. At 27, Maya's hands move with purpose, scrubbing dishes with fierce precision, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth pulse with pain. The notebook in her apron pocket, filled with Southern folk tales, presses against her hip, a lifeline to her mother's voice. "Your story is your strength." Evelyn's insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, echoes, but Maya's resolve is iron, forged in the fire of her low-country roots. She pauses, her fingers gripping the sink's edge, knuckles whitening. The kitchen buzzes with servers rushing past, their trays clattering, but Maya's world narrows to the weight of her notebook. She pulls it out, flipping to a tale about a woman who outwitted a storm, her mother's words inked in her own hand. Her chest heaves, her breath steadying as she reads silently, each line a spark reigniting her fire. "I'm still here," she whispers, her voice a vow, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. She won't let Evelyn's cruelty or the crowd's judging stares erase her. Her dream of writing a book, of sharing her ancestors' stories, fuels her, a flame no matriarch can douse. A young server, barely 20, stumbles nearby, dropping a glass that shatters on the tile. His face pales, his hands shaking as he mutters, "They'll fire me." Maya kneels beside him, her apron brushing the floor, and grabs a rag. "Breathe," she says, her voice firm but kind, cutting through his panic. "You're bigger than one mistake." She hands him the rag, guiding his trembling hands to clean the shards. "My mom used to say," she adds, her lips curling into a faint smile, "a broken glass is just a story waiting to be told." The boy's eyes widen, his shoulders easing, and he nods, a flicker of gratitude breaking through his fear. Maya's heart lifts, her own pain easing as she helps him, her strength a beacon in the chaos. Footsteps approach, and James Hawthorne, 30, leans against the kitchen doorway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his gaze locked on Maya. "You're something else," he says, his voice low, carrying a warmth that cuts through the clatter. Maya's pulse skips, her fingers tightening on the rag. "Just doing my job," she snaps, her tone sharp, wary of his intentions. She's seen him at past galas, his easy charm masking a restlessness she can't place. "Not just that," he counters, stepping closer, his eyes tracing her face. "You stood up to her. That takes guts." Maya's jaw tightens, her teeth grinding, unsure if he's an ally or another Hawthorne trap. "Guts don't pay my bills," she fires back, her voice a blade, but her eyes flicker with curiosity. James hesitates, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venomous words. "I've been watching her," he says, his voice dropping, a secret barely contained. "She's not as untouchable as she thinks." Maya's breath catches, her fingers brushing her notebook, sensing a shift. She wants to press him, to demand answers, but another server interrupts, shouting for help with a spilled tray. Maya moves to assist, her steps quick, her apron swinging, but James's words linger, a spark in her mind. As she helps the server, her eyes dart to a crumpled paper on the floor, half hidden under a counter, its edge marked with faded ink. Land debt. Her pulse spikes, her fingers itching to grab it, a new thread in the unraveling tapestry of the Hawthorne legacy. "You don't get to play victim, girl," Evelyn Hawthorne snaps, her voice a whip as she storms into the kitchen, her cream silk dress swishing like a blade. Maya Johnson, 27, freezes mid-step, her white apron streaked with gumbo, her hands still gripping a rag from helping a young server. Evelyn's earlier insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, burns fresh, and her half-hearted apology in the library only sharpened the sting. Now her gray eyes blaze, but a flicker of unease betrays her, sparked by the truth note and a faded land deal record she found. Maya's jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her notebook of Southern folk tales pressing against her hip, a shield of her low-country pride. "I'm not your victim," Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, cutting through the kitchen's clatter. Her dark eyes lock onto Evelyn's, unyielding, her fingers tightening on the rag until her knuckles bleach. "You humiliated me. Own it." Evelyn's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. "Enough," she hisses, cutting Maya off. "I spoke too harshly. That's all you'll get." The words are a grudging concession, but Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with defiance. She steps forward, closing the gap, her apron a banner of her fight. "That's not enough," she says, each syllable a spark. "You want forgiveness? Let me speak at your gala. Let my story be heard." Evelyn's face hardens, her nails digging into her palms, her pulse spiking at the audacity. "Speak?" she scoffs, her voice a razor. "You're a server, not a guest." But Maya doesn't flinch, her eyes burning, her mother's tales fueling her resolve. "I'm Maya Johnson," she says, her voice thunderous, "and my stories are worth more than your guest list." The kitchen staff pause, their glances darting, caught by the clash. Evelyn's breath catches, her teeth grinding, The truth note in her clutch, a weight she can't ignore. The chef's praise for Maya's gumbo and the crowd's murmurs gnaw at her, a chain of doubts cracking her control. Fine, she snaps, her voice tight, a reluctant surrender. One story. Don't embarrass me. Maya's lips curl, not a smile but a challenge, her fingers brushing her notebook, its pages heavy with her ancestors' strength. I'll tell a truth you can't silence, she says, her tone cutting, a vow that makes Evelyn's eyes narrow. The matriarch turns to leave, her heels clicking, but pauses, her hand clutching her purse. Don't push me, she warns, her voice low, a threat laced with fear. Maya holds her gaze, her heart pounding, her resolve iron. She won't bend. Not now, not ever. The kitchen door swings shut behind Evelyn, leaving a tense silence, the staff resuming their tasks with hurried glances. Maya slips her hand into her apron, pulling out the crumpled paper she found earlier, marked land debt. Her pulse spikes, her fingers trembling as she unfolds it. Scrawled in faded ink is a note. Hawthorne land built on stolen ground. Check the old ledgers. Her breath hitches, her mind racing. Stolen ground? The words tie to the truth note Evelyn found. A thread of something darker, something buried in the Hawthorne legacy. She tucks the paper back, her eyes darting to the door where James Hawthorne lingers, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his gaze intense. You okay? He asks, his voice low, a warmth cutting through her tension. Not yet, she says, her tone sharp but curious, sensing he knows more than he lets on. James steps closer, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venom. I've got something on her, he says, his voice a whisper, a secret ready to spill. You're not alone. Maya's heart skips, her fingers tightening on her notebook, the land debt note burning in her mind. She wants to press him, to unravel his words, but a server calls for her, pulling her back to the gala's chaos. She moves, her steps deliberate, her apron swinging, but the note's promise lingers, a fuse lit in the shadows of the Hawthorne estate, ready to explode. You're a liar stirring up trouble, Lillian Hawthorne hisses, her voice a venomous slash as she corners Maya Johnson in a dimly lit hallway of the Hawthorne estate. The gala's chatter hums faintly beyond the walls, but Lillian's presence, sharp as a blade, drowns it out. At 45, Evelyn's cousin and a board member of the Hawthorne Empire, Lillian's tailored black dress clings to her frame, her hazel eyes glinting with malice. Maya, 27, grips her white apron, the notebook of Southern folktales in her pocket a steady weight against her hip. Evelyn's earlier insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, still sears, and the land debt note Maya found, hinting at stolen ground, burns in her mind. Lillian's sudden attack, sparked by overhearing Maya's talk with James about the note, is a new threat, her words slicing deeper than Evelyn's. You think you can waltz in here with your stories? Lillian snaps, stepping closer, her manicured nails jabbing the air. Maya's jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her pulse racing from the gala's earlier tensions. I'm not here to play games, Maya fires back, her voice low, cutting, her dark eyes locking onto Lillian's. I'm telling the truth. Lillian's lips twist, her hand slashing to cut Maya off. Truth? She scoffs, her voice a whip. You're a server, nothing more. Keep your nose out of our business. The words sting, echoing Evelyn's cruelty, but Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with defiance. Her fingers brush the notebook, its tales of low-country resilience fueling her fire. Lillian leans in, her perfume sharp, her voice dropping to a hiss. I heard you and James, she says, her eyes narrowing, a predator sensing blood. Poking into family matters. Stop, or you'll regret it. Maya's heart pounds, her knuckles whitening as she grips her apron, the land debt note's words. Hawthorne land built on stolen ground, flashing in her mind. She steps forward, refusing to shrink, her voice steady. I'm not scared of you, she says, each syllable a spark. Your family's secrets don't own me. Lillian's face contorts, her teeth grinding, her control fraying. You're nothing, she spits, cutting Maya off again. A nobody trying to ruin us. The hallway feels tighter, the air thick with tension. Maya's pulse spikes, her mind racing to the note in James's whispered promise. I've got something on her. She wants to shove past Lillian, to find James and unravel the truth. But Lillian steps closer, her voice a low growl. Stay away from him, she warns, her finger jabbing at Maya's chest. He's a hawthorn. You're just help. The jab lands like a punch, but Maya's eyes blaze, her mother's tales echoing. Stand tall, always. I'm Maya Johnson, she says, her voice thunderous, and I'm more than your insults. Lillian's smirk falters, her hand dropping, but her eyes burn with a new resolve, a threat unspoken. A server rushes past, nearly knocking into Lillian, who snaps, watch it. The distraction gives Maya a moment to breathe, her fingers slipping into her apron, brushing the land debt note. Lillian notices, her gaze sharpening, her voice slicing again. What's that? She demands, reaching for Maya's pocket. Maya jerks back, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands shielding the note. None of your business, she says, her tone a blade, her eyes daring Lillian to push further. Lillian's lips purse, her nails digging into her palms, but she steps back, her heels clicking as she turns. You'll learn your place, she says, her voice a venomous promise, leaving the air heavy with menace. Maya exhales, her breath shaky, her fingers trembling as she clutches the note. Lillian's threat, tied to the land debt mystery, feels like a noose tightening. She glances down the hallway, where James's silhouette lingers near the gala's entrance, his phone in hand, his eyes searching for her. Her pulse quickens, sensing he holds the key to the secrets Lillian guards. But as she steps toward him, a faint rustle catches her ear. A hidden ledger, tucked behind a painting, its corner peeking out, promising answers that could shatter the Hawthorne empire. You're digging your own grave, Maya. Lillian Hawthorne's voice slices through the hallway, her hazel eyes blazing as she catches Maya Johnson, reaching for the hidden ledger behind the painting. The gala's distant hum of Savannah's elite fades, leaving only the weight of Lillian's threat from moments ago. You'll learn your place. And the land debt note burning in Maya's apron pocket. At 27, Maya's white apron, flecked with gumbo stains, clings to her frame, her notebook of Southern folk tales a steady anchor against her hip. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples pulse, her pulse hammering from Lillian's venom and the ledger's promise of truth. She jerks her hand back, her fingers trembling, but her dark eyes lock onto Lillian's, unyielding. Don't touch what's not yours, Maya snaps, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. You're a thief, snooping in our house, she hisses, stepping closer, her black dress a shadow of menace. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she holds her ground, her fingers brushing the notebook, its tales of low-country resilience fueling her fire. I'm finding the truth, she fires back, her tone cutting, and you can't stop me. Lillian's face contorts, her nails digging into her palms, her voice a whip. Truth? You're a server, not a detective. The words sting, echoing Evelyn's filthy insult, but Maya's heart pounds, her resolve iron. Footsteps echo and James Hawthorne, 30, bursts into the hallway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his eyes blazing with urgency. Back off, Lillian, he says, his voice a low growl cutting through the tension. Lillian spins, her gaze sharpening on her cousin. You're with her? She spits, her finger jabbing at Maya. She's poison. James steps between them, his shoulders squared, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venom, and now Lillian's. She's more family than you, he says, his tone a blade, his eyes locked on Maya's, a spark of something deeper flashing. Maya's pulse skips, her fingers tightening on the notebook, sensing an ally but wary of his motives. Show me, Maya says, her voice steady, nodding toward the ledger. Lillian lunges, her hand grabbing for it, but James blocks her, his arm a barrier. Enough, he snaps, his voice thunderous, shoving Lillian back. We're done hiding. Lillian's eyes narrow, her teeth grinding, but she steps back, her heels clicking, her voice a venomous hiss. You'll ruin us, she says, storming off, leaving the air thick with menace. Maya's breath catches, her fingers snatching the ledger, its leather cover worn, its pages heavy with secrets. She flips it open, her eyes scanning faded ink. Dates, names, land deals from the 1950s, tied to the Hawthorne name. Her heart slams against her ribs, the land debt notes words, Hawthorne land built on stolen ground, coming alive. "We need more," James says, his voice urgent, his hand brushing Maya's arm, a touch that sends a jolt through her. She nods, her jaw clenching, her mind racing to the note's hint. "Check the old ledgers." "Savannah Historical Society," she says, her tone sharp, a plan forming. They slip out of the estate, dodging gala guests, their steps quick, driven by the ledger's weight. At the Society's library, a dusty archive smells of old paper. But Maya's focus is razor sharp. She and James pore over records, her fingers trembling as she finds a map, its lines marking a low-country plot, her family's land, stolen by the Hawthorns through forged deeds. "This was my mother's," she whispers, her voice breaking, her eyes blazing with pain and purpose. James pulls out his phone, revealing a recording of Lillian from a past event, muttering about keeping the land deals quiet. "She's in on it," he says, his voice low, his eyes meeting Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's chest tightens, her teeth grinding as she pieces it together. Lillian's wealth, tied to her board position, comes from that stolen land. "My ancestors built that ground," she says, her voice a spark, her notebook open to a tale of justice, her mother's words urging her on. They find another document, a letter from Evelyn's father, admitting to unfair dealings with black families. Maya's pulse spikes, her fingers clutching the letter, its ink a confession of theft. A librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, approaches, her voice low. "You're stirring ghosts," she says, handing them a faded photo of the stolen plot, showing Maya's great-grandparents working the land. Maya's breath hitches, her heart pounding, the photo tying her blood to the truth. "We're not stopping," James says, his tone fierce, his hand brushing Maya's a quiet vow. Lillian's threat, "You'll ruin us," echoes, but Maya's resolve hardens, her notebook a weapon, its stories a call to fight. As they leave, a shadow moves in the archive's corner, a figure watching, their face hidden, clutching a file marked Hawthorne Secrets, a new threat lurking in the silence. "You're tearing this family apart!" Lillian Hawthorne's voice slices through the silence, her hazel eyes blazing as she intercepts Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne in the Hawthorne Estates archive room. The gala's distant hum fades, replaced by the weight of the land debt note in the map Maya clutches, proof her family's low-country land was stolen by the Hawthorns. At 27, Maya's white apron hangs loose, her notebook of Southern folk tales a steady weight in her pocket, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's earlier threat, "You'll ruin us," burns fresh, and the shadowy figure they glimpsed at the Historical Society, clutching a file marked Hawthorne Secrets, looms in Maya's mind. Her pulse hammers, her fingers gripping the map, its lines tying her blood to the truth. "You stole my family's land," Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of accusation. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to cut her off. "Lies," she snaps, her voice a whip, stepping closer, her black dress a shadow of menace. "You're a nobody with a grudge." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she holds the map higher, its faded ink a testament to her ancestors' loss. "This says different," she says, her tone thunderous, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's. James, 30, steps forward, his suit rumpled, his phone in hand, its recordings of Lillian's mutterings. "Keep the land deals quiet," a loaded weapon. "She's right," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through Lillian's sneer. "Your secrets are done." Lillian lunges, her nails clawing for the map, but Maya jerks back, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Don't touch it," she warns, her voice a spark, her fingers trembling but firm. Lillian's face contorts, her teeth grinding, her control fraying. "You'll pay for this," she hisses, her eyes darting to a locked cabinet in the corner, its brass handle glinting. James follows her gaze, his pulse spiking, and yanks the cabinet open, revealing a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed, marked with Hawthorne Land Acquisitions. Maya's breath catches, her fingers flipping through it, landing on a 1950s entry, Johnson Land, acquired through coercion. Her heart stops. The name, her family's, etched in cold ink, proof the Hawthornes built their empire on theft. Lillian, you knew, James says, his voice raw, his eyes blazing with betrayal. Lillian's lips quiver, her hands clenching, but she snaps, "You're a traitor," cutting him off. Maya's eyes burn, her mother's tales of resilience echoing, "Fight for what's yours." "This was my great-grandparents' home," she says, her voice breaking but fierce, holding up the ledger. "You profited from their pain." Lillian's face pales, her nails digging into her palms, but she lunges again, shoving Maya against the cabinet. "Stop this," she screams, her voice cracking, a desperate plea to bury the truth. James pulls her back, his grip iron, his voice a blade. "It's over," he says, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's hands shake, clutching the ledger, its weight a chain to her ancestors' stolen legacy. Her pulse races, her mind reeling. Lillian's wealth, her board position, all tied to this theft. "You can't hide this," she says, her voice a vow, her notebook's tales urging her on. Lillian stumbles back, her breath ragged, her eyes darting to the door, where a shadow shifts, a figure watching, their silhouette clutching the Hawthorne Secrets file from the Historical Society. Maya's heart lurches, her fingers tightening on the ledger, sensing the truth is only half unearthed, a deeper betrayal waiting to surface, ready to ignite the gala into chaos. "You're a dead woman, Maya," Lillian Hawthorne snarls, her voice a venomous slash as she slams the archive room door shut, trapping Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne inside. The lock clicks, a sound sharp as a gunshot, cutting off the distant hum of the Hawthorne gala. Lillian's black dress clings to her frame, her hazel eyes blazing with desperation. Her role in the family's land theft, stolen from Maya's ancestors, exposed by the ledger Maya clutches. At 27, Maya's white apron, stained with gumbo, hangs loose, her notebook of Southern folktales pressing against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her pulse hammering from the truth. The Hawthornes built their empire on her great-grandparents' stolen land. Lillian's earlier threat, "You'll pay for this," burns fresh, and the shadowy figure from the Historical Society, clutching a Hawthorne Secrets file, looms in Maya's mind. "You can't bury this," Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance, her fingers tightening on the ledger, its pages heavy with proof. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. "Shut up," she snaps, her voice a whip, yanking a lighter from her purse, its flame flickering as she holds it near a stack of old files. "This ends now." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she steps forward, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's. "Burn it, and you burn yourself," she says, her tone thunderous, her mother's tales of resilience echoing in her skull. James, 30, lunges for the lighter, his suit rumpled, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're done, Lillian," he says, his voice a growl, but Lillian shoves him back, her nails clawing at his arm. "You traitor!" Lillian screams, her voice cracking, her lighter sparking as she tosses it onto the files. Flames lick the edges, smoke curling, a choking haze filling the room. Maya's heart slams against her ribs, her pulse spiking as she grabs the ledger, shielding it with her body. "We're getting out," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes scanning for escape. Lillian laughs, a jagged sound, her hand slamming the cabinet shut. "You're trapped," she hisses, cutting Maya off, her eyes glinting with malice. "No one will believe a server." Maya's teeth grind, her fingers trembling but firm, the notebook in her pocket urging her on. She remembers a tale her mother told about a woman who outsmarted fire, and her mind races, spotting a rusty vent in the corner. "Move!" Maya shouts, shoving James toward the vent, her apron swinging as she kicks at the grate, her foot aching with each blow. Lillian lunges, grabbing Maya's arm, her nails digging in, drawing blood. "You're nothing!" she spits, her voice a venomous slash. Maya twists free, her elbow slamming into Lillian's chest, sending her stumbling. "I'm everything you stole," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her eyes blazing through the smoke. James pries the vent open, his hands bleeding, his breath ragged. "Go!" he yells, his voice raw, pushing Maya toward the opening. The flames spread, crackling, the heat searing Maya's skin. But she crawls through, the ledger clutched tight, her notebook a steady weight. They tumble into a dark passage, coughing, the smoke chasing them. Maya's heart pounds, her fingers gripping the ledger. It's truth, her weapon. "She'll pay," she says, her voice a vow, her eyes meeting James's, a shared fire igniting. He nods, his hand brushing hers, a touch that steadies her. "I've got her on tape," he says, his voice low, his phone holding Lillian's confession from earlier. Maya's pulse quickens, her mind flashing to the shadowy figure. Their Hawthorne secrets file a missing piece. They stumble toward the gala's light, their steps quick, but a creak behind them stops Maya cold. A door in the passage opens, revealing a glint of steel, a new threat waiting to strike. "You'll never outrun me!" Lillian Hawthorne's voice echoes through the dark passage, her words a venomous slash as Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne scrambled toward the faint glow of the Hawthorne Gala. The glint of steel from a hidden figure in the passage, clutching a knife, their face obscured, sends Maya's pulse hammering, her white apron, stained with gumbo, catching on the rough walls. At 27, her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, while the ledger of stolen land, clutched tight, burns with the truth of her ancestors' loss. Lillian's fire in the archive room, meant to destroy evidence of the Hawthorne land theft, still crackles behind them, smoke stinging Maya's lungs. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her heart pounding from the narrow escape. "Keep moving," Maya snaps, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of urgency as she shoves James forward, her hands trembling but firm on the ledger. Lillian's scream, "You're nothing!" rings in her ears, but Maya's resolve is iron, fueled by her mother's tales of resilience. James, 30, stumbles, his suit torn, his hand bleeding from prying open the vent, his phone gripping recordings of Lillian's confession. "She's behind us," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through the passage's damp air. Maya's eyes dart back, catching a shadow moving, the steel glinting again. "Not for long," she fires back, her tone thunderous, her fingers brushing the notebook, its stories urging her to fight. They burst into a storage room, crates of old files stacked high. The galas hum louder now. Maya's chest heaves, her breath ragged, but she dives for a crate, ripping it open, her fingers tearing through papers. "Find it," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes scanning for the Hawthorne Secrets file glimpsed at the Historical Society. James kneels beside her, his hands shaking, pulling out a yellowed folder. "Here," he says, his voice raw, flipping it open to reveal a 1950s contract signed by Evelyn's father, admitting to coercing black families, including Maya's, out of their land. Maya's heart stops, her fingers trembling as she reads her great-grandparents' names, inked in betrayal. "This is it," she whispers, her voice breaking, her eyes blazing with pain and purpose. Lillian's footsteps echo closer, her voice slicing through. "You're dead," she screams, her knife glinting as she charges into the room, her black dress a shadow of rage. Maya ducks, her body slamming behind a crate, the ledger clutched to her chest. "You stole everything!" Maya shouts, her voice a vow, cutting through Lillian's advance. James lunges, grabbing Lillian's wrist, twisting the knife free, his arms straining, his breath ragged. "Stop this," he snaps, his voice thunderous, shoving her back. Lillian stumbles, her nails clawing at the air, her eyes wild. "You're betraying your blood," she spits, cutting him off, her voice cracking with desperation. Maya scrambles to another crate, her hands tearing through files, her pulse spiking as she finds a grainy photo. Her great-grandparents, working the stolen low-country plot, their faces etched with labor and pride. "This was theirs," she says, her voice fierce, holding the photo high, her eyes boring into Lillian's. The older woman's face pales, her teeth grinding, but she lunges again, knocking the photo from Maya's hand. "It's ours!" Lillian screams, her voice a jagged blade, but Maya dives, snatching it back, her knuckles whitening. James pulls his phone, hitting play on a recording. Lillian's voice, clear, admitting, "The land deals stay buried, or we lose everything." The sound stops Lillian cold, her breath hitching, her hands trembling. "We've got you," James says, his voice low, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's heart pounds, her fingers clutching the photo, ledger and notebook, each a piece of her fight. She remembers a tale her mother told, about a woman who turned truth into a weapon, and her resolve hardens. "You can't hide this," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes daring Lillian to move. The older woman's face contorts, her nails digging into her palms, but she backs toward the door, her voice a hiss. "This isn't over," she warns, slipping into the gallows crowd, leaving the air thick with menace. Maya's breath steadies, her hands shaking but firm, the evidence a burning weight. She glances at James, his hand brushing hers, a touch that steadies her. "We need one more piece," she says, her tone sharp, her mind racing to the shadowy figure from the passage. They move toward the gala, their steps quick, but a faint click stops them. A hidden safe, cracked open in the corner, its contents spilling a single letter, sealed with the hawthorn crest, promising a final truth that could shatter everything. "You're finished, Lillian." Maya Johnson's voice cuts like a blade, her words ringing out as she storms onto the gala's main stage. The ledger of stolen land clutched in her hands. The Hawthorne Estates crowd falls silent, their glasses frozen mid-clink, eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's fire in the archive room and her knife-wielding threats burn fresh, but the photo of Maya's great-grandparents, the forged contract, in James's recordings, proof of the Hawthorne land theft, fuel her fire. Her pulse hammers, the letter from the hidden safe, sealed with the Hawthorne crest, burning in her pocket. Lillian, 45, stands at the crowd's edge, her black dress a shadow of rage, her hazel eyes blazing. "You're a liar!" she screams, her voice a whip, lunging toward the stage, her nails clawing the air. Maya steps forward, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's, unyielding. "This is my family's truth," she says, her voice thunderous, holding up the ledger, its pages exposing the 1950s theft of her ancestors' land. The crowd gasps, some clutching their pearls, others leaning closer, caught by her fire. James, 30, joins her, his suit torn, his phone in hand, the recording of Lillian's confession. The land deals stay buried, ready to play. "She's right," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through Lillian's advance. "You profited from theft." "You traitor!" Lillian shrieks, her voice cracking, shoving through guests to reach the stage. "You're no Hawthorne!" James hits play, and Lillian's recorded voice blares through the speakers, admitting to hiding the land deals. The crowd murmurs, their faces paling, some turning to Evelyn, 65, who stands frozen, her cream silk dress trembling, her gray eyes wide with shock. "Stop this!" Evelyn snaps, her voice a desperate slash, cutting James off. But he holds up the photo of Maya's great-grandparents, their faces etched with labor on the stolen plot. "This is their land," he says, his tone fierce, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared vow igniting. "You stole their lives." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, her fingers trembling as she pulls the sealed letter from her pocket. She rips it open, her heart slamming against her ribs, and reads aloud, her voice steady. "Evelyn's father, 1955, confessing to forging deeds to seize black families' land." The crowd erupts, whispers turning to shouts, some guests stepping back, others clapping, their loyalty fracturing. Lillian lunges again, her nails grazing Maya's arm, but Maya shoves her back, her elbow sharp, her voice a spark. "You can't silence this," she says, holding the letter high, its ink a blade cutting through the Hawthorne legacy. Lillian stumbles, her face contorted, her teeth grinding, her control shattered. Evelyn steps forward, her hands shaking, her voice a hiss. "Enough!" she screams, but the crowd drowns her out, their eyes on Maya, some nodding, others filming on their phones. "You built your name on our pain," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her notebook's tales urging her on. "Fight for what's yours." James takes her hand, his grip iron, his voice raw. "Maya's my family," he says, his words a gauntlet, his eyes daring the crowd to challenge him. The applause grows, a wave crashing over Lillian's screams, her black dress a fading shadow. Evelyn's face crumples, her gray eyes haunted, her empire unraveling. Maya's pulse steadies, her fingers clutching the ledger, photo, and letter, each a weapon forged from her ancestors' strength. The crowd's cheers swell, a tide turning against the Hawthorns, but Lillian's final glare promises retribution. As Maya steps off the stage, her apron swinging, a server slips her a folded note, its edge marked with a single word, justice. Her heart lurches, sensing a final piece of the puzzle, hidden in the gala's shadows, ready to ignite the last battle. "You're a disgrace!" A guest's voice slices through the gala's stunned silence, aimed at Lillian Hawthorne as she stumbles off the stage, her black dress a crumpled shadow of defeat. Maya Johnson, 27, stands tall, her white apron stained with gumbo, clutching the ledger and photo that exposed the Hawthorne land theft, her ancestors' low-country plot stolen decades ago. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. The crowd's cheers from moments ago, sparked by James's recording and Maya's fiery words, "You built your name on our pain," still echo, their phones filming, their eyes pinning Lillian. Her pulse hammers, the justice note from a server burning in her pocket, a promise of retribution fulfilled. Lillian's hazel eyes dart, her nails digging into her palms, her voice a desperate hiss. "This is a lie!" she screams, lunging toward Maya, her hands clawing for the ledger. Maya steps back, her dark eyes blazing, her voice thunderous. "It's over," she says, holding the evidence high, its ink a blade cutting through Lillian's lies. James, 30, grabs Lillian's arm, his grip iron, his suit torn from their archive escape. "You're done," he snaps, his voice a growl, cutting her off. "The police have the files." Lillian's face pales, her teeth grinding, her body trembling as two officers step forward, their badges glinting, summoned by a guest call after the stage reveal. "You can't," Lillian shrieks, her voice cracking, but the officers cuff her wrists, her screams fading as they lead her out. The crowd murmurs, some clapping, others turning to Evelyn, 65, who stands frozen, her cream silk dress quivering, her gray eyes hollow. "I didn't know," she mutters, her voice a weak slash, but Maya's gaze cuts through her. "You ignored it," she says, her tone sharp, her heart pounding with the weight of her ancestors' truth. The ledger, photo, and letter, proof of the Hawthorne's theft, are handed to the officers, ensuring restitution for Maya's family and others. Lillian's board position is stripped, her wealth tied to the stolen land frozen, her empire shattered. Maya's chest heaves, her breath steadying, her fingers brushing her notebook, its tails urging her forward. James's hand grazes hers, his eyes fierce with pride. "You did this," he says, his voice low, a vow of solidarity. The crowd's applause swells, their faces shifting from judgment to respect, but Maya's pulse quickens, the justice note a spark in her mind. She glances at Evelyn, whose trembling hands clutch a small key, her eyes darting to a locked drawer nearby, hinting at one last secret that could redefine the Hawthorne legacy. "You think a key fixes your sins?" Maya Johnson's voice cuts like a blade, her words slicing through the fading gala cheers as she faces Evelyn Hawthorne, whose trembling hand clutches a small brass key. The Hawthorne estate's crowd lingers, their phones still filming, their eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's arrest, cuffed for her role in the family's land theft, still echoes, the ledger, photo, and letter, exposing the Hawthorne's theft of Maya's ancestors' land now in police hands. Evelyn, 65, stands frozen, her cream silk dress quivering, her gray eyes haunted by the justice note Maya holds, a spark from the gala's turning tide. "I'm not my father," Evelyn snaps, her voice a desperate slash, her fingers tightening on the key, cutting Maya off. Her face twists, her breath ragged, the weight of her family's crimes crushing her polished facade. Maya steps closer, her dark eyes blazing, her voice thunderous. "You ignored it," she says, her tone sharp, her heart pounding with her ancestors' pain. "You built your name on stolen ground." Evelyn's lips quiver, her nails digging into her palm, her pulse spiking as the crowd murmurs. Some nodding, others shifting, their loyalty fracturing. "I didn't know," she hisses, her voice cracking, but Maya's gaze pierces her. "You chose not to," Maya fires back, her words a spark, her notebook's tales urging her on. Evelyn stumbles toward a locked drawer in the gala's reception area, her hands shaking as she jams the key in, yanking it open. "I'll fix this," she shouts, her voice a raw plea, pulling out a stack of documents, titles to low-country plots, including Maya's family's land. "I'm giving it back," she says, her tone wavering, thrusting the papers toward Maya. The crowd gasps, their phones capturing every move, some clapping, others whispering. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with skepticism, her fingers brushing her notebook, its stories of resilience anchoring her. "Words don't erase theft," she says, her voice steady, her eyes daring Evelyn to prove it. James, 30, steps beside her, his suit torn, his hand grazing hers, his voice low. "Make it real," he says, his tone fierce, cutting through Evelyn's hesitation. Evelyn's jaw clenches, her teeth grinding, but she grabs a pen, signing the titles over to a trust for low-country families, her signature shaky but deliberate. "I'm funding a foundation," she declares, her voice breaking, her eyes meeting Maya's. "For your culture, your stories." Maya's pulse skips, her fingers trembling as she takes the papers, her heart racing, her great-grandparents' land, returned after decades. "This isn't enough," she says, her voice a vow, her eyes blazing with purpose. "You'll work with us." Evelyn nods, her face crumpling, her hands dropping the key, its clatter a surrender. The crowd erupts, applause swelling, some guests stepping forward, offering support, their faces lit with respect. James pulls Maya close, his grip iron, his eyes fierce with pride. "You're changing everything," he says, his voice raw, a promise of solidarity. Maya's breath steadies, her fingers clutching the titles, the notebook a burning weight. She remembers a tale her mother told, about a woman who rebuilt a community from ashes, and her resolve hardens. "We'll do it together," she says, her tone sharp, her eyes meeting his, a shared fire igniting. Evelyn steps back, her silk dress sagging, her gray eyes hollow but resolute. "I'll make it right," she mutters, her voice a faint slash, but Maya's gaze holds her accountable. "You'll start now," Maya says, her voice thunderous, pointing to a guest, a local historian, who nods, ready to join the foundation. The crowd's cheers grow, a tide of hope washing over the gala. But Maya's pulse quickens, sensing an unfinished edge. She slips her hand into her apron, pulling out the justice note, its ink stark against the paper. A faint mark catches her eye, a faded seal, matching the hawthorn crest, hinting at one last secret buried in the family's past, waiting to reshape their future. "You think signing papers erases your family's crimes?" Maya Johnson's voice slices through the fading gala applause, her words a blade aimed at Evelyn Hawthorne, who stands clutching a stack of land titles freshly signed over to a low-country trust. The Hawthorne Estates crowd, Savannah's elite, watches in hushed awe, their phones lowered, eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's arrest for the land theft, Evelyn's foundation to preserve Maya's culture, and the justice note with its faded hawthorn seal burn in her mind, fueling her fire. Her pulse hammers, her dark eyes blazing as she steps forward, refusing to let Evelyn's gesture be the final word. "You don't get to decide my worth," Maya says, her voice thunderous, cutting through Evelyn's trembling silence. The matriarch, 65, in her cream silk dress, flinches, her gray eyes hollow, her hands shaking as she grips the titles. "I was wrong," Evelyn mutters, her voice a weak slash, trying to interrupt, but Maya's gaze pierces her, unyielding. "You built your empire on my family's pain," she fires back, her tone sharp, holding up the justice note, its seal matching the one on the titles. "This ends with truth." The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others stepping closer, their tailored suits and pearl necklaces no longer a wall, but a bridge. Evelyn's lips quiver, her nails digging into her palms, her breath ragged. "I'm trying," she says, her voice cracking, but Maya's eyes narrow, her heart pounding with her ancestor's strength. Maya pulls her notebook from her apron, its worn pages heavy with tales of resilience, and opens it, her fingers trembling but firm. "My mother taught me this," she says, her voice steady, reading aloud a story of a low-country woman who rebuilt a village after betrayal. Her words ring out, each syllable a spark, silencing the crowd, their faces lit with respect. James Hawthorne, 30, stands beside her, his suit torn, his hand grazing hers, his eyes fierce with pride. "Keep going," he says, his voice low, cutting through the crowd's hush, a vow of solidarity. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with purpose, her mother's tale anchoring her. "This is my legacy," she says, her tone thunderous, holding the notebook high, its pages a banner of her fight. Evelyn steps forward, her hands shaking, and pulls a sealed envelope from her purse, its hawthorn crest matching the justice note. "This is yours," she says, her voice a faint slash, thrusting it toward Maya. "My father's last confession." Maya's pulse spikes, her fingers ripping it open, revealing a letter admitting the full scope of the land theft. Names, dates, bribes that stole her great-grandparents' plot. "You knew," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her eyes boring into Evelyn's. The matriarch's face crumples, her teeth grinding, but she nods, her voice barely audible. "I failed them," she says, her hands dropping, a surrender to the truth. The crowd gasps, some clapping, others filming, their applause swelling into a tide of support. Maya's heart steadies, her fingers clutching the letter, notebook, and photo, each a weapon forged from her ancestors' pain. "This isn't just for me," she says, her voice a vow, turning to the crowd. "It's for every family you erased." She pulls a pinch of low-country soil from her pocket, a ritual her mother taught, and scatters it on the ground, her apron swinging, her eyes blazing with purpose. The crowd roars, their cheers a wave crashing over Evelyn's fading reign. James takes her hand, his grip iron, his voice raw. "We'll build something new," he says, his eyes locked on hers, a promise of a future together. Maya nods, her breath steadying, her notebook's tales urging her forward. "Your story is your power." A local historian, the one who aided their investigation, steps up, her sharp eyes glinting. "I'll join your foundation," she says, her voice firm, handing Maya a digital archive of low-country stories. "Let's tell them all." Maya's pulse quickens, her fingers trembling as she takes it, sensing a community rising. Evelyn, her silk dress sagging, approaches, her hands empty but outstretched. "I'll fund it," she says, her voice a quiet slash, her eyes meeting Maya's with newfound humility. "For you." Maya's jaw clenches, her teeth pulsing, but she nods, her voice sharp. "For us all," she says, her tone a spark, sealing the pact. The crowd parts, their faces alight with hope, as Maya steps toward a small stage, her apron a banner, her notebook open. She reads another tale, her voice thunderous, weaving her ancestors' strength into Savannah's future. James stands beside her, his hand steadying hers, their bond a fire no theft could douse. Evelyn lingers at the crowd's edge, her gray eyes soft, her hands clasped, a shadow of redemption. The gala transforms, no longer a cage but a canvas, its walls echoing Maya's stories. She scatters the last of the soil, its grains a constellation on the ground, her heart swelling with possibility. The crowd's cheers fade, but a single voice, a child's, calls out, "Tell another." Maya smiles, her eyes blazing, her notebook a beacon, promising a legacy that will outlast the Hawthorne's shame. Maya Johnson's journey teaches us that resilience and pride in one's heritage can shatter prejudice, forging a path to justice and unity. Her fight against the Hawthorne's legacy of theft proves that truth, wielded with courage, can rebuild communities and redefine families. What did Maya's story stir in you? Share your thoughts or your own tales of standing tall in the comments below. Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us on this powerful ride. Stay bold and we'll see you in the next story. Get out of my sight. You don't belong here. Margaret Ellison's voice slices through the Grand Plaza's auction hall, sharp as a guillotine. Her sequined gown glints under the chandeliers, but it's her sneer that draws blood. Laura Bennett, 35, stands frozen, her beige silk dress clinging to her frame like a second skin. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding so hard her temples throb. Margaret, 48, a Manhattan art collector with a tongue sharper than her diamond earrings, steps closer, her heels clicking like a predator's claws. "What's that rag you're wearing? Thrift store clearance?" She spits, loud enough for every head to turn. Phones whip out, cameras flashing, capturing Laura's humiliation. Laura's fingers tighten around her clutch, knuckles whitening. "I'm here for the cause," she says, voice steady but low, like a taut wire. Margaret cuts her off. "Cause, please. You're a nobody playing dress-up in a room full of somebodies." The crowd murmurs, a venomous hum. Margaret's eyes rake over Laura's simple dress, her plain flats, her unadorned neck. "You think you can waltz into my world? Check her invite," she barks at a trembling staff member. The young man fumbles, approaching Laura with an apologetic glance. "Ma'am, may I see—" "No need," Laura snaps, her voice cutting through his hesitation. She pulls out a gold-embossed card, holding it high. The staff member stammers, "Mrs. Bennett, you're cleared." Margaret's laugh is a jagged blade. "Cleared? She probably stole it." The accusation lands like a punch, and Laura's chest tightens, her breath shallow. She feels the weight of 100 eyes, judging, mocking, dissecting. A woman in a fur coat whispers to her companion, "Who let her in?" Another chuckles, "Lost tourist, maybe." The phones keep recording, their lenses like vultures circling a carcass. Laura's pulse hammers in her ears, but she squares her shoulders. "I don't need to prove myself to you," she says, her words a quiet defiance. Margaret steps closer, her perfume choking the air. "Oh, honey, you're proving exactly what you are. A cheap fraud." She snatches a glass of red wine from a passing tray, and with a flick of her wrist, splashes it across Laura's dress. The liquid stains the beige silk like blood, dripping onto the marble floor. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Laura's hands tremble, but she doesn't flinch. Her eyes lock onto Margaret's, burning with a fire that silences the room for a heartbeat. "You'll regret that," Laura says, her voice low, a promise wrapped in steel. Margaret smirks, tossing her hair. "Regret? I'm Margaret Ellison. I own this city's art scene. You're nothing." She turns to the crowd, raising her glass as if toasting her victory. "Someone get this trash out before she ruins the evening." The staff member hesitates, caught between Margaret's command and Laura's unyielding stance. Laura's fingers curl into fists, nails biting into her palms. She feels the sting of the wine soaking through her dress, cold against her skin, but it's the humiliation that burns hotter. Every whisper, every stare, every click of a camera feels like a lash. A man in a tuxedo mutters, "She doesn't look like she belongs." Laura hears it, and her heart lurches, but she refuses to break. She steps forward, closing the gap between her and Margaret. "You don't get to decide who belongs," she says, her voice rising just enough to carry. The crowd hushes, sensing a shift. Margaret's smirk falters for a split second, but she recovers, leaning in. "Keep talking, sweetheart. You're only digging your grave deeper." The words are a challenge, a dare to fight back in a world where Margaret holds all the cards, or so she thinks. Laura's lips part, ready to fire back, but a distant figure moves through the crowd, unnoticed by Margaret. The air crackles with tension, the promise of a reckoning just out of sight. Laura Bennett stands rooted to the marble floor of the Grand Plaza's auction hall, her beige silk dress dripping with Margaret Ellison's red wine. The stain spreads like a wound, but it's the weight of the crowd's stares that cuts deeper. Her fists clench, nails carving crescents into her palms. Margaret's smirk is a blade, slicing through the air as she waves off a staff member's hesitant approach. "Remove her!" Margaret snaps, her voice a whip crack. "She's ruining my evening." The crowd's murmurs swell, a chorus of judgment. Phones flash, capturing every second of Laura's humiliation. A woman in pearls hisses, "She's out of place." Another mutters, "Embarrassing." Laura's chest heaves, her breath sharp and ragged, but her eyes burn with defiance. She steps forward, closing the gap to Margaret, her flat silent against the marble. "You don't own this room," she says, her voice low, steady, a steel wire stretched taut. Margaret laughs, a harsh grating sound. "Own it? I am in this room. You're just dirt on my floor." She flicks her wrist, dismissing Laura like a servant. The staff member edges closer, his face pale, torn between duty and discomfort. "Ma'am, please," he mumbles, gesturing toward the exit. Laura's jaw tightens, teeth grinding until her temples pulse. She doesn't budge. "I'm here for the kids who need books, not your approval," she fires back, her words a quiet grenade. The crowd hushes, some leaning forward, caught by her resolve. Margaret's eyes narrow, her diamond earrings glinting as she leans in, voice dripping venom. "Kids, spare me the sob story. You're a fraud, and everyone sees it." She turns to the crowd, arms wide, playing to her audience. "Who let this nobody in? She's a disgrace." Laura's pulse thunders, her heart hammering against her ribs. The word nobody lands like a fist, echoing every doubt she's buried since marrying Daniel Harper. But she doesn't flinch. Her spine straightens, shoulders squaring like a soldier facing fire. "Call me what you want," she says, her voice rising, clear and unshaken. "But I'm not leaving, not because of you." The crowd shifts, whispers rippling like a stone dropped in water. A man in a tuxedo frowns, rethinking his judgment. A woman with a diamond choker hesitates, her phone lowering slightly. Margaret's face twists, her composure cracking. "You think you can talk back to me?" she hisses, stepping so close Laura can smell her floral perfume, sharp and suffocating. "I've built this city's art scene. You're nothing but a cheap dress and a stolen invite." Laura's hands tremble, but she holds Margaret's gaze unflinching. "My worth isn't in my dress," she says, her voice a blade of its own. "It's in what I do for others. Can you say the same?" The question hangs, heavy, a challenge that silences the room for a heartbeat. The staff member freezes, unsure how to proceed. Margaret's smirk falters, her eyes darting to the crowd, seeking allies. But some faces now show doubt, others curiosity. Laura takes a step back, not in retreat, but with purpose. She grabs her clutch, stained with wine, and turns toward the exit, her movements deliberate, graceful. "You'll see who I am," she says, her voice low, prophetic, echoing in the hushed hall. The crowd parts as she walks, her head high, the red stain on her dress like a badge of defiance. Margaret scoffs, trying to reclaim control. "Good riddance," she calls, but her voice wavers, betraying a flicker of unease. As Laura reaches the grand doors, a man's silhouette looms in the shadows, watching her exit with an intensity that promises consequences. The crowd's whispers grow louder, phones still recording, unaware that the real storm is just beginning. Margaret Ellison stands triumphant in the Grand Plaza's auction hall, her sequin gown catching every light as the crowd's whispers fuel her ego. Laura Bennett's exit, her beige dress stained red with wine, feels like a victory. Margaret tosses her hair, diamond earrings flashing, and raises her glass to a nearby ally. "That's how you handle trash," she says, voice sharp as a shard of glass. But the words barely leave her lips when a woman in a velvet gown leans toward her companion, muttering, "Wasn't that Laura Bennett, Harper's wife?" Margaret's smile freezes, her grip on the glass tightening until her knuckles blanch. Her pulse quickens, a cold prickle crawling up her spine. She laughs, sharp and forced, brushing off the comment. Harper, please, that nobody's not married to anyone important. But her eyes dart to the crowd, scanning for confirmation. A man in a pinstripe suit scrolls on his phone, his brow furrowing. Look at this, he says, showing his wife a headline. Daniel Harper, tech billionaire, spotted with wife Laura at charity gala. Margaret's stomach lurches, her breath catching like a hook in her throat. She snatches the phone, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. The photo shows Laura in that same understated style, beside a man whose quiet intensity screams power. Daniel Harper, billionaire, her victim's husband. Margaret's chest tightens, her heart pounding like a war drum. No, she hisses, shoving the phone back. She's a fraud, she has to be. But doubt creeps in, a venom seeping through her veins. She turns to a staff member, her voice low, urgent. That woman, Laura, who cleared her invite? The young man, still shaken from the confrontation, stammers. Mrs. Bennett, VIP. Her name's on the platinum list. Margaret's eyes widen, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Platinum list, reserved for the elite, people with money, influence, power, people like Daniel Harper. The crowd's murmurs grow louder, a buzz of accusation. A woman in a sapphire necklace whispers, Margaret went too far. Another says, that was Harper's wife? She's done for. Margaret's head snaps toward them, her face flushing crimson. Mind your own business, she snaps, but her voice cracks, betraying her panic. She smooths her gown, fingers trembling, trying to reclaim control, but the phones keep flashing, their lenses catching every flicker of fear in her eyes. The video of her splashing wine on Laura is already spreading, a digital wildfire she can't contain. She spins toward the exit, her heels clicking furiously, determined to find Laura and fix this before it spirals. But a glint on the floor stops her cold. A pearl earring, delicate and out of place, lies near where Laura stood. Margaret bends down, her fingers brushing the cool gem. It's not hers, it's too simple, too modest, like Laura. Her mind races. Did Laura drop it? Why does it feel significant? She pockets it, her hand shaking, a strange unease settling in her gut. It's just an earring, she tells herself, but the weight of it feels like a warning. Mrs. Ellison, a voice cuts through her thoughts. A staff supervisor, stern-faced, approaches. We need to discuss the incident. The board's already getting calls. Margaret's jaw drops, her voice a hiss. Calls? From who? The supervisor's eyes are cold. Important people. They saw the video. They're not happy. Margaret's knees weaken, her hand clutching a nearby chair for support. The room spins, the crowd's whispers now a roar in her ears. She sees a man in the corner, his silhouette familiar, watching her with an intensity that chills her blood. Is that Harper? Her throat tightens, her breath shallow. She forces a smile, her voice brittle. It was a misunderstanding. I'll handle it. But her words sound hollow, even to her. The crowd's eyes bore into her, no longer admiring but judging. The pearl earring burns in her pocket, a tiny anchor pulling her toward a truth she's not ready to face. She takes a step toward the exit, her heart racing, knowing the real cost of her disgraceful move is just beginning to unfold. You've made a mess, Margaret, and I won't clean it up. Richard Klein's voice snarls through the phone, his words a whip cracking across Margaret Ellison's pride. Her fingers clutch the pearl earring in her pocket, its smooth surface a cold reminder of her mistake. She stands in the Grand Plaza's bustling lobby, her sequined gown now feeling like armor too heavy to bear. Her pulse races, a drumbeat of panic. The video of her splashing wine on Laura Bennett is everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, gossip blogs. Comments flood in. Disgusting snob. Who does she think she is? Her chest tightens, her breath shallow as she scans the crowd for Laura. She needs to fix this. Now. Margaret shoves past a group of tuxedoed men, her heels clicking like gunfire. Where is she? She mutters, her voice a low growl. She corners a staff member, a nervous girl with a clipboard. Laura Bennett. Where'd she go? The girl flinches, stammering. She left, ma'am. Headed toward Brooklyn, I think. Brooklyn. The word hits like a slap. Margaret's lip curls, but her stomach twists. Brooklyn means Laura's not hiding in some penthouse. She's gone back to her roots. That realization stings, a needle in Margaret's pride. She storms out, hailing a cab with a sharp wave. "Brooklyn, fast!" The driver nods, peeling into traffic. Margaret's phone buzzes, another notification, a news alert. Art collector Margaret Ellison faces backlash for public humiliation at auction. Her fingers tremble, nearly dropping the phone. She scrolls, her eyes burning. The video has 200,000 views. Her name trends with hashtags under an Ellison shame or an art world snob. Her throat closes, her breath a ragged gasp. She dials her assistant, voice clipped. "Find Laura Bennett, now. I need her address." The cab weaves through Manhattan's chaos, but Margaret's mind is louder. She sees Laura's face, those steady eyes, that defiant stance. "You'll see who I am," Laura had said. The words echo, a taunt. Margaret's nails dig into her palms, drawing blood. She's not sorry. Not really. But she knows Daniel Harper's power. A billionaire like him could crush her career, her connections, her life. She needs to find Laura. Spin this, make it right before he does worse. Her hand brushes the pearl earring again, its weight heavier than before. Why does it matter? She shakes the thought, focusing on survival. In Brooklyn, the cab pulls up to a community center, its sign faded but proud. Bright Futures Education Hub. Margaret steps out, her gown absurd against the gritty sidewalk. She pushes through the door, her eyes scanning the room. Kids laugh, scribbling in notebooks. Volunteers bustle, but no Laura. Margaret's chest heaves, frustration boiling. She grabs a volunteer, a wiry man with glasses. "Laura Bennett, is she here?" He frowns, protective. "Who's asking?" Margaret's temper flares. "Margaret Ellison. Tell me where she is." The man's eyes narrow, recognizing her name. "You're the one from the video," he says, voice cold. "She's not here for you to bully again." Margaret's face burns, her pulse hammering. "This is a misunderstanding," she snaps, but her voice wavers. The volunteer points to the door. "Leave, now!" The rejection stings, a public slap of its own. She steps back, her heels unsteady. Outside, her phone buzzes again, a text from Richard Klein. "Fix this, or the board pulls your funding." Her heart lurches, her breath catching. She's losing control, her empire crumbling with every retweet. The crowd outside the center grows, some pointing, whispering. "That's her," one says, phone raised. Margaret's hands shake, her composure fracturing. She dials her assistant again, voice a hiss. "Get me her exact address. I don't care how." As she waits, her eyes catch a poster on the center's wall. Laura Bennett, Volunteer of the Year. The photo shows Laura smiling, surrounded by kids. Margaret's stomach churns, a mix of rage and dread. She's not just a nobody. She's someone who matters. The realization hits like a fist, but Margaret shoves it down. She'll find Laura, say whatever it takes, and bury the scandal. But the pearl earring in her pocket feels like a ticking bomb, whispering of secrets she can't yet grasp. "You're stronger than her, Laura. Don't let her win." Daniel Harper's voice cuts through the hum of the Bright Futures Education Hub in Brooklyn, his hand gripping Laura Bennett's tightly. Her beige dress, still stained with Margaret Ellison's red wine, clings to her frame, a badge of the humiliation she endured hours ago at the Grand Plaza. Laura's jaw clenches, her teeth grinding as she kneels beside a young girl, helping her sound out a word in a tattered book. Her eyes burn, not with tears, but with a fire that refuses to flicker out. The community center buzzes with kids' laughter, volunteers chatter, and the scratch of pencils. But Laura's heart pounds, replaying Margaret's venom. "You're a nobody playing dress-up." She rises, brushing her hands on her dress, the wine stain stark against the beige silk. "I'm not running, Daniel," she says, her voice low, steady, a blade honed by resolve. Daniel, 42, a tech billionaire with eyes that see through walls, nods, his suit jacket slung over a chair, sleeves rolled up. "I know," he says, his tone fierce with pride. "You never do." He steps closer, his hand brushing her cheek, gentle but firm. That video's everywhere. She's crumbling already. Laura's lips twitch, a half smile breaking through. Good, she says, her voice sharp. Let her feel it. A boy tugs at Laura's sleeve, holding up a drawing. Miss Laura, look! His grin is wide, gap-toothed, oblivious to her turmoil. She kneels again, her fingers steady as she praises his work. This is amazing, Jamal, she says, her voice warm, masking the storm inside. Her chest tightens, the weight of Margaret's words, fraud, nobody, still clawing at her. But these kids, this place ground her. She's been here for years, teaching, mentoring, giving everything to kids who have nothing. This is her world, not Margaret's glittering cage. Daniel watches, his gaze intense, protective. You're why I started the AI project, he says, voice low, cutting through the room's noise. Your heart, your fight, it's changing lives. Laura's breath catches, her fingers pausing on the book. She looks up, meeting his eyes, seeing the truth in them. She's not just his wife, she's his partner, his muse. The thought steadies her, but doubt lingers. They'll always see me as an outsider, she says, her voice a whisper, raw. No matter what I do. Daniel's jaw tightens, his hand squeezing hers. They're wrong, and they'll learn. His phone buzzes, a message from his team. Ellison's scrambling. The board's furious. Laura's eyes narrow, a spark igniting. She's coming for me, isn't she? She says, not a question, but a certainty. Daniel nods. She's desperate. Let her come. Laura's lips press into a line, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. She won't hide. Not here. Not anywhere. A volunteer, a wiry woman with a clipboard, approaches. Laura, you okay? She asks, glancing at the wine stain. Laura nods, her chin lifting. I'm fine, Sarah. Just another day. But her hands tremble slightly, betraying the effort to stay composed. She moves to a table, helping another child with a math problem, her voice calm but her pulse racing. The center is her sanctuary, but Margaret's attack has breached its walls. She feels exposed, vulnerable, yet unbroken. Daniel's phone buzzes again. A notification. Ellison spotted outside. Laura's head snaps up, her eyes locking with his. She's here, she says, her voice a low growl. Her fingers curl into fists, nails biting into her palms. She's not ready to forgive, not yet. But she's ready to fight. As she helps a child pack up, her hand brushes a stack of papers, dislodging a faded letter tucked beneath. It falls to the floor, its seal broken, the word Ellison scrawled in old ink. Laura freezes, her breath hitching. Something's coming, something bigger than Margaret's cruelty. I'm sorry, all right? Let's end this circus. Margaret Ellison's voice cracks like a snapped wire as she bursts into the Bright Futures education hub, her sequined gown glaringly out of place among the worn tables and children's drawings. Laura Bennett freezes, her hand clutching the faded letter she just found. The word Ellison scrawled on it like a warning. Her pulse hammers, her jaw tightening until her teeth ache. Margaret's diamond earrings flash as she strides forward, heels stabbing the linoleum floor. You've made your point, Margaret hisses, her face flushed, eyes darting to avoid the curious stares of volunteers. That video's ruining me. Name your price. Laura's fingers tighten around the letter, her knuckles whitening. She rises from the table where she was helping a child, her wine-stained beige dress a silent accusation. Price? She says, her voice low, sharp as a blade. You think you can buy your way out of this? Margaret's lips twist, her composure fraying. Don't play noble, she snaps, cutting Laura off before she can continue. Everyone has a price. Tell me yours, and this ends now. The words are a slap, but Laura's eyes burn, unyielding. She steps forward, closing the gap, her breath steady despite the storm in her chest. Daniel Harper, standing nearby, folds his arms, his gaze cold as steel. You don't get to dictate terms, he says, his voice a low growl. Margaret flinches, her eyes flicking to him, recognizing the billionaire's quiet menace. Mr. Harper, she stammers, her hands trembling. This was a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was your wife. Laura's lip curls, her voice slicing through. That's your excuse? You humiliated me because I didn't look like I belonged? The room quiets, volunteers pausing, kids glancing up. Margaret's face reddens, her fingers clutching her purse. I was wrong, she says, voice brittle, forced. I'm sorry. Laura's chest tightens, the apology ringing hollow. Sorry doesn't erase what you did, she says, her words deliberate, each one a hammer strike. You mocked me, shamed me, because you thought I was nothing. You don't get to walk away clean. Margaret's eyes narrow, her pride clawing back. What do you want then? To ruin me? Laura's gaze doesn't waver. I want you to learn, she says, her voice rising firm. Volunteer here. 6 months. Teach these kids. See what it means to care about something bigger than your ego. The demand lands like a grenade, and Margaret's jaw drops, her breath catching. Volunteer? Margaret chokes out, her voice a mix of disbelief and scorn. Here? With these people? The insult stings and a volunteer nearby gasps, her hand tightening on a stack of books. Laura's fists clench, nails biting into her palms. Yes, here, she says, her voice a quiet inferno. Or I let Daniel's lawyers tear your world apart. Daniel steps closer, his presence a wall of authority. Choose fast, Mrs. Ellison, he says, his tone icy. My team's already drafting the papers. Margaret's eyes dart between them, her face paling as the weight of her mistake crashes down. She nods, a jerky, reluctant motion. Fine. 6 months, she mutters, her voice barely audible, her pride shattered. Laura's shoulders relax slightly, but her eyes remain sharp, watchful. She glances at the letter in her hand, its edges worn, the Ellison name glaring. What's this? She asks, holding it up. Margaret's eyes widen, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Nothing, she says too quickly, her hand twitching as if to snatch it. Laura pulls it back, her instincts flaring. It's got your name on it, she says, her voice low, probing. Margaret's lips part, but no words come. Her face is a mask of fear. Daniel's eyes narrow, sensing the shift. What are you hiding? He asks, his voice a blade. Margaret shakes her head, her hands trembling. It's just old business, she stammers, but her eyes betray her, darting to the door. Laura tucks the letter into her clutch, her pulse quickening. We'll find out, she says, her words a promise, heavy with intent. The room feels charged, the air thick with unspoken secrets. Margaret backs away, her heels unsteady, her empire teetering on the edge of a cliff she can't see. Keep your mouth shut or you'll regret it. Richard Klein's voice snarls through the phone, a venomous hiss that makes Laura Bennett's blood run cold. She stands in the cluttered office of the Bright Futures Education Hub in Brooklyn, her fingers gripping the faded letter with Ellison scrawled across it. Her pulse pounds, her jaw clenching until her teeth ache. The letter found moments ago after Margaret's forced apology feels like a live wire in her hand. Richard, 50, the steely-eyed manager of Margaret Ellison's prestigious Manhattan Museum, isn't just angry. He's dangerous. His threat slices through the line, a blade aimed at Laura's resolve. You don't scare me, Laura snaps, her voice sharp, unwavering, despite the tremor in her hands. Richard's laugh is cold, jagged. You're playing with fire, Mrs. Bennett. Drop that letter. Forget what you saw. He cuts her off before she can respond, his words a barrage. You think you're safe because of Harper? Money doesn't protect you from me. Laura's chest tightens, her breath shallow. She glances at Daniel Harper, who stands nearby, his fists clenched, eyes blazing with fury. Who's this? Daniel demands, snatching the phone. Richard's voice doesn't falter. Tell your wife to back off, Harper, or I'll bury you both. Laura's fingers curl tighter around the letter, nails biting into her palms. The memory of Margaret's wine splashing her dress fuels her defiance. We're not backing down, she says, her voice a low growl stealing the phone back. Richard's tone turns icy. You're digging your own grave. That letter's nothing. You're nothing. The words echo Margaret's earlier taunts. But Laura's spine stiffens, her resolve hardening like steel. Then why are you so scared? She fires back, her words a dart hitting its mark. Richard pauses, a beat of silence that screams guilt. Daniel's hand lands on her shoulder, his grip firm, protective. "We're coming for you," he says into the phone, his voice a quiet storm. Richard scoffs, but it's strained. "Try it. You'll crash and burn." The call ends with a click, leaving Laura's pulse hammering in her ears. She looks at the letter, its worn edges taunting her. It mentions a fund tied to Margaret's museum, with Richard's initials scrawled in the margin. Her gut twists, sensing a deeper rot.